Well, good afternoon. The Regents are now back, and we're going to convene the Academic and Student Affairs Committee meeting chaired by Regent Pika.
Thank you, Chair Schauer. Hello, everyone. I want to welcome everyone to the Academic and Student Affairs Committee meeting, and I'd especially like to kind of formally welcome our new provost, Dr. Chris Riley Tillman. Has it been what? 3 months. Wow, it seems like longer. Welcome. Yeah.
In the best way possible.
Yes, no, absolutely.
All good. Provost Riley Tillman began his tenure July 1st and joining us from the University of Missouri, where he served as Dean of the College of Education and Human Development. Welcome again. And today we have 4 information and discussion items, and kicking off with something that we were reminded earlier in the meeting in terms of risk management, just how important enrollment is. So I'm going to turn this over to you, Provost Riley Tillman, and Saichi.
And I will move it over to Saichi.
Good afternoon. Happy to be here. It's a beautiful day in Pullman. I think I'm running my slideshow tonight, so let's see if I got it right. Let me know when it's there. We go. Okay. Thank you very much. We're going to jump right in. Okay, maybe we're not. We're going to take all this out when it goes to film. Okay. So here's what we'll cover today. We'll talk about the cycle that just ended, talk a little about where we landed for 24. We'll look ahead at the cycle that began on August 1, which is for 25. We'll talk about some things that we typically don't talk about in the enrollment brief, and that's going to be retention. I'm going to have Chris come back in a conversation when we do that. And then I don't have a slide on this, but I'm going to talk about it. Some activity during Apple Cup last week. We had some really great programs. We had about 80 events, and I want to share a little of that information. So here you go, first year enrollment. So you know, right, we're 2-0. Okay, not the football team. Football team's 3-0. Enrollment management's 2-0. Second year in a row, more first year students than the previous year. Right? The goal is to get about 4 years of this under our belt. We need to turn it around by bringing in more students. Last year, 6.5%. This year, 2.4%. But we also had about 1.2% more transfers. We haven't seen an increase in transfers since before the pandemic. Really pleased that we see both of them. I'm going to give you some general comments about the cycle when I get to the slide that has all the campuses on it. Overall in system enrollment dropped 3% from the previous year. Now, some of this I've shared before. Our incoming classes are smaller than our outgoing graduating classes. And that's been the story for about 4 years. We had some really large incoming classes in 18 and 19. They're just working their way out of the system. This year, we also had a decline in graduate students. Now, some of this we forecast. We knew cost of assistantships would go up. Likely some programs, as a reaction, their enrollment would go down. And that's what we see. Key demographics of our first year students. First one I'll draw your attention to, almost 4% more students of color in this first year class. Really important because as white middle class students, the numbers decline, and they've made up college going for about 30 years. In their place will be more Latinx, more underrepresented students. We have to be a choice for those students. I'm going to jump to the very last statistic, a 7% increase in low-income students. Now, I would love to say it's all about WSU on this one. Likely what's happening here is the way that Pell eligibility is determined under the FAFSA simplification rules are probably allowing more students to be codified as low income. Now, we did lose some international students. We did gain more Washington residents, always important. And we had a slight decline in first generation students, flattened veterans, and a small increase for women in our first year class. Demographics for transfer students, again, an increase over 3% for persons of color. Low income also increased a little over 3%. So we like those two. Now here's one that probably you're all just staring at. Why did first generation drop by 7%? I don't have a good answer for you. We have to get together as a team, get some more people around the table and talk about it, dissect this number. Who exactly are we talking about? Where exactly are they coming from or not coming from? But we'll get to the bottom of it and we'll share that information when we have it. So here's what enrollment looked like across the system. And here's where I want to offer some context. I would say this is the first year that we didn't feel the lingering effects of the pandemic. First year. However, we were negatively impacted by the FAFSA delay. We lost about 6% of FAFSA filers this year as compared to last year. Our award letters, which often go out ahead of many of our other sister schools in the state, was delayed by almost 90 days. So instead of February and March timeline, you're now looking at May and beyond. That impacted students' decisions. Like the pandemic, any uncertainty in the process causes people to slow down, rethink their plans. Undoubtedly, students not only at WSU, but probably across the country, chose not to go to school this fall. Look, Everett and Tri-Cities get no love at these things. I always talk about Pullman. I'm going to talk about Everett and the Tri-Cities. They did a tremendous job, despite the FAFSA delay, at attracting first-year and transfer students. A really good effort. Percentage-wise, led the system. The N isn't as large, but the trend of increasing first-year and transfer students, really important, and we need to continue. They did a tremendous job in that. But overall, I would tell you, in the context we were under, the fact that transfers at Vancouver were down only 10 from the previous year, you know what? I'll keep that in the win category for now. We know we're going to have to improve on this. We need a little help from the community college system as well. Here's where I'm going to talk a little about the Apple Cup, and I don't have a slide for it. So the game is scheduled for Lumen Field. The foundation, the president's office, and alumni begin thinking about how they want to roll out Apple Cup week. They ask us to participate. Absolutely. I asked Michelle Lewis, participate how we can. And we say, look, during that week, one of the most successful events we hold are called instant decision days, literally as it sounds. We go to a high school. We know we're going to have an audience. We admit students who are qualified instantly on the spot. A lot of buzz is generated. We scheduled 80 such events around Washington, most in the West. Some of the other campuses that focus on first-year students also had them at their local schools. We had 4 programs out of the state of Washington, and I think we had 4 virtual programs. 80 programs for the week. We knew about 1,200 students were interested in it. Cut to the chase, we admitted 1,550 people by Monday morning of this week. So when you add that 1,500 people to our statistics for the cycle, it pushes where we are to 70% ahead of where we were last year. Kirk asked me, do you think this is going to make a difference, this sort of Apple Cup activity? I'm thinking, yes, I think it will. I told Chris maybe we could have one next month and the month after that. Just joking. But I think this does help us, especially in that market. A lot of work from the campuses, a lot of folks doing a lot of work in that week, really capitalizing on the buzz that's around Apple Cup. Here's where we're going to sort of take a jog, and I'm just going to tee this up for Chris. We're going to talk about retention. We're going to talk about enrollment management, student life cycle. And this first slide I'll probably speak to, but I'm going to just turn it over to Chris first.
Yeah, we talk a lot of things about a lot of things with the board where we're asking for significant amounts of money and new projects coming up and all that. And I think this is an area of where in the first 2.5 months being here, I've observed 2 things being true at once. We have some significant resources across campuses, across colleges, across all of Washington State University, focusing on the student experience, whether we're talking about advising or we're looking at the fiscal shape of our students, or if we're talking about different student life experiences, different affinity experiences, et cetera. and I think that's fantastic. I think we've got really good people, very, very committed to these different operations. We're also wildly siloed in these operations. And that's, usually when we're talking about the metrics or siloed or complexity, we immediately jump to system. If we do the same thing, if we just look at colleges, we have very, very different approaches and mentalities for how we're working with the student experience once we get them in the door. The challenge with that is that the siloed experiences, whether we want to talk about Greek life or we want to talk about engineering, having a student success group, or really, really nice student success work at Tri-Cities or Vancouver, whatever we want to talk about. Those are most typically successful for these students who need the least amount of support while they go through a particular educational experience at an institution. It's the students who move or something happens, and so something that they thought was going to work for them doesn't work. So for example, they pledge and they don't match. Okay, what's next? Where's the handoff? They thought they were going to be a chemical engineer, and they've decided that's not exactly their path, and so they need to look at something in a different college or a different place. Yeah. Okay. There's always an engineering joke here, but in those instances, what we don't have are consistent fundamentals that one can see in each type of experience, and really seamless handoffs, so that when you don't get one preferred experience that you think you're going to get, you can have another experience. And so we're going to go across this year, and we are cataloging and understanding all of the different operations that we have to support students. And the goal here is we say retention, but it's the entire experience of we get people to come in the door. We want them to go through their entire life being related to the university. Obviously, if we don't keep them between year 1 and year 2, then that's not going to occur. What I'd like to do is this is an area where I don't believe we need a big committee. I don't believe we need a consulting firm to come in and tell us what the key, there's been a tremendous amount of work done in the field in the 2000s to understand the different leverage points that we have. I don't think this is an area where we don't have a lack of people or talent or even high quality programs. It's having consistent fundamentals that are true across all of WSU. And so if I use advising, for example, I think we should have a model of what COOG advising looks like. And there should be fundamentals that students can expect, parents can expect, whether they're in Vancouver or whether they're in Pullman, whether, whatever scenario that they're in. And then also allowing the individual units, whether that's engineering or it's Tri-Cities, to have their own unique flair and version of that matches their particular student population and student experience. And so this is going to require some testing of our systemness. It's going to require some testing of our ability for colleges to work together and actually have an institutional vision. And so there will be some political challenges. I expect there probably will be some complaints made above my head. And so this will be an area of where I'm hoping that we'll get some strong support. But we've got some really nice pieces in place. I think if we can dovetail them together, we're going to have a much more successful student experience for that 19-20% of the population that we're losing. And so when we start talking 2% gains or 3% gains, there's a point of where the funnel in, well, it's incredibly important. But if we can get to the point of where we're at about 90-91%, which is a realistic goal, you're retaining a massive number of students, and then that just compounds throughout the entire life cycle. More alumni, more stakeholders, more impact on the state, all of those things. So we'll have a lot more to talk about this coming up. I think in the first meeting that we had on this yesterday, we started off with a 3-month model, and I asked for information 2 weeks from now. Saishi still is with us the first time we've talked since, so I don't know if he's talking to me yet on this topic. But
can I ask a quick question?
Absolutely.
Can we make sure we're checking at what level we're losing students and at what rate? We talk a lot about first-year retention. I'd like to talk about second-year retention.
Sure.
Third-year retention.
Oh, of course.
4 to 6 year graduation rates. And
absolutely.
Part of why I say that is EAB was doing some of our data. And I remember I have a very vivid memory of being in a presentation where they said, WSU did great. Your first year attrition went down by 5%. Your second year attrition went up by 4%. I want to make sure we're taking care of our students. As
Absolutely.
they graduate.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
some data on, and we've kind of been giving this excuse out publicly of, well, our enrollment's going down because we've got these small middle classes. It would be nice to see those numbers.
No, I agree. I don't think anything I'm talking about here is specific for first to second year. I mean, you can have advising snafus, or you could fall out of an affinity group that's really important to that can occur in year 2, year 3, obviously with major changes, et cetera, that often isn't between first year and second year. And so all of those different pieces. We're also going to get into the idea of what data streams do we want to be monitoring, because we do not have a university agreement on how we're judging teaching effectiveness in terms of degree completion. We'll talk about that coming up a little bit more. Ashi?
So just in general, we offered this slide. It's obvious why it matters, but there's some things up there that maybe aren't as obvious for some folks. Obviously, the financial stability it provides is important, second largest resource. It's expensive to bring students into the university, and retaining them just leverages that investment. If you don't have 80 programs, it costs money to have 80 programs in a week. Student success and outcomes, right? That is what we're here for. That is the mission. We don't just recruit somebody to say we recruited them. We need them to find some success, stay with us, and graduate. And ultimately, students are part and parcel with the culture of the WSU. Students we bring in and the students that we retain, they develop and share that culture with students that also are new to the university. And ultimately, we want this relationship from the very beginning of the relationship of recruiting them, graduation, and hope they become lifelong alumni giving donors. So important stuff. I believe this will actually occupy a retention in total will occupy a future Regents meeting.
Yep.
One of the things we talked about, Chris and I, was literally the role of enrollment management in this sort of new vision. And as I mentioned, he used the term student life cycle. That is part and parcel with enrollment management. It really is. It's something that if you find a really mature school who's been doing this for a long time, their operation would look really closely like the continuum I'm showing you, right? Where in the beginning, you focus on getting people in. Maybe as you move from left to right, you sort of integrate more of the operations. It's a little more holistic. You take more and more of the student life cycle into account. Ultimately, this maturity scale, if you will, takes years to develop. I would candidly say WSU is well within initial, probably halfway through the operational. Have we embraced the strategic or the integrated? I think those are the challenges ahead of us. But this works well. I think when Chris first shared this vision with me, it wasn't a shock. It wasn't anything I hadn't heard of. In fact, I think this would be the natural evolution of what WSU needs to do for the future. My last slide with you, because Kirk always asks, what are you doing differently? Always let the Regents know what you're doing, right? The business we're in enrollment management is, what are you doing for me today? I already mentioned the instant decision days. And we started them probably 2 years ago, but the reason I'm focusing on them is just think of a 17 or 18-year-old now, right? The process of admissions is weeks, if not months. When you provide them instant admission, right? This then conforms to what their life really is with their phone and their friends. And this thing is taking off. We had less than, I don't have the exact number, but I would bet we maybe did 20 instant decision days 2 years ago. Last year, I think we did 80 in the year. I already told you the punchline. We did 80 last week. Now, we're not going to do 80 every week, but we know this is what students like. And as long as we're not losing our ability to help students who can make it here and students who we think aren't going to make it here, as long as we don't lose that ability in this process, we're going to continue it. WAGAP has been around for a couple of years, but here's what's new. The expansion of this program will probably go to at least 50% of high school seniors will be at a school that participates in WAGAP. Right now, it might be about 40%. So getting to that next level is really important. It allows all those students the opportunity to be admitted to one of the baccalaureates within the state of Washington. I see this program just continuing to roll out. Lost market. So believe it or not, some students don't enroll after we admit them. Some actually choose not to enroll anywhere. Some go to a community college. By the rules that we operate under in admissions and enrollment management, we can still contact those students and encourage enrollment. They're our lost market. If they enroll at another four-year school, it's not just unwritten, it is rule. You don't continue to recruit them directly. If they come back out of it or ask you for information, obviously. We finished a college tour video in August. The world premiere was on campus. The 10 students were brought up on stage, and the host, Alex Boylan, who runs this, interviewed each of them. It was a really great time. We had a great crowd. And I believe Tracy sent an email on behalf of Chris and I to all the regents to take a look at this. It's a 30-minute video, but it's serialized, right? It's designed so the student doesn't want to watch 30 minutes, but he wants to see what that student from California, how did that person get to Pullman? So you can look at it that way, or somebody says, well, I'm talking about living on campus, I'm going to go to that spot. We like it, and we did it because we needed to leverage the appeal of the Common App across the country. So when I mentioned this once, I think Regent Peak had asked me, we went to the Common App because we were looking for an increase of 10% in application activity, especially non-resident. Punchline, 35% increase. So here's the next step. How do we help all those students looking at us understand what WSU is like? Let's start with Pullman. We went to the college tour. We ship this out. We send it in a text, a link, a portion of it for the student who's interested in that portion. We needed something for them to jump onto versus just the interest through the Common App. Not everybody's going to come over and visit us. Niche profile. This is just another platform in which universities and colleges belong to, and then students then profile themselves on niche. There are hundreds of thousands of students on this platform. Students then grade each university on several metrics, and that's what is presented to the public. It's both scary and fascinating. WSU does tremendously well on most of those, if not all. I encourage you, niche.com, look for WSU, you'll see everything. And then finally, inside baseball, a little July Jumpstart. This marries two things that we know work at WSU: getting them to visit campus and offering instant decision opportunities. So that's what we did this past July to encourage more students to show up in their junior year to campus. We offered them the ability to sort of be pre-qualified into the class. About 103 students said yes, they want to be pre-qualified. 83 we could, 20 we will work with. But this is just another way in which we're trying to figure out, you can't have just discrete strategies. You have to figure out which ones you can put together and probably will help you expand some of your applicant pool. I'm actually going to stop here and see if there are any questions.
Yeah, I'm really interested in this instant decision thing. It sounds like it is really getting kids engaged. So, your next slide down was the big funnel.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And if you do this instant admission, have you had enough data to at least begin to see do those students that get instant admission, do they tend to matriculate more or less than or the same as the big funnel from all admissions?
We have not drilled that far. And last year, there were probably, I would bet, 500 students who we admitted through instant decision. We admit 20,000 students, so we're not really sure if that would move. We could track each of the 500, but we haven't. I'll be blunt.
Yeah, I know you haven't done it for that long, but I was just wondering if you'd seen any trends or if it seemed, just to sort of lead to the effectiveness of doing that.
Yeah, we haven't, but I think that is an opportunity for us to explore. Absolutely.
Oh, good question. Has the FAFSA problem been solved yet, or is that still FAFSA? Is it still a problem?
Yeah, how we have chosen to mitigate the delay and any sort of hiccups on the Fed side is admirable. But ultimately, we are beholden to the process that emanates from the DOE. So right now, our understanding is the FAFSA form will be available December 1. And Joyce Gurry, who's been running financial services for Pullman for several years, she has a great ear and eye to this profession. She would say, don't hold your breath, right? That this may not be as smooth as everybody is saying right now. But if there's any silver lining, we had a year, we learned last year what we needed to do. And so I think it won't be a matter of ramping it up. We'll be ready to go if there's another delay.
As part of our recruitment efforts in outreach effort, are we communicating what's available in state financial aid? As I understand it, there's money out there.
Yeah, absolutely. So the Washington College Grant is the most generous financial need program, I would say, easily in the West, probably in the country. We do. That program, though, not enough people take advantage of the program, and not just at WSU. I mean, in the state of Washington, not enough people do.
Why? I mean, do we not know about it, or is it not being communicated well?
No, I can't answer that. That program isn't WSU's. If it was, we would leverage it very differently, I'm sure, as would all the campuses. But it's think of a student who wants to go to school and he hears about the FAFSA, or she hears about the FAFSA, and she hears about institutional financial aid, maybe we even have a scholarship form, which the application is. And then they're told about this third grant. And they think, well, everything I did, doesn't that help me qualify? Kind of, but you're still gonna have to manage and deal with the third party. And I just think the more parties you keep putting on a student, the tougher it is to get the message you want, the one message about college is affordable.
This is I mean, I was actually talking with the governor about this this weekend. This is an area of where the state as a whole, I mean, this is by far the best state program in the United States. I mean, it is exceptionally generous, and it's of course targeting a population that is uniquely situated for WSU, right? So this is something which is incredible. There are areas of where we probably could do a better job celebrating what the state has done and recruiting concurrently. I mean, this is a substantial long-term opportunity. This is, from my understanding, also still relatively young. I mean, this has not been around for 20 or 30 years.
True.
And so there's just WSU is not the only entity that has some marketing challenges. The state as a whole often has programs and things that they're pushing forward, and folks just don't know. So it's also just acculturating the state to realize that if you're a state citizen here, this is an opportunity that you would not get anywhere else, and this should be one of the first things that you're looking at. So we will aggressively push this out as much as possible. But I'm also talking with the governor that this is also something that the state needs to be pushing out, of an incredible state resource. It's something that we should be talking with industry. We should be talking about. I mean, this is a reason why people should want to come to Washington, work in Washington, have their businesses in Washington. And I'm not sure. I mean, I had no idea about it until coming here, and then stepping into some of that. And obviously, that's not where we
sounds like a good podcast.
Yeah.
Hey, I got one last question. I'm always looking for an angle. I'm really pleased to see that, our students of color, the numbers there. Why have we been successful, and what else can we do to increase it even more?
When we think about talking to students about going to WSU, we mean every student. And I was watching Phil share what they're doing in Spanish. And I was reminded that we have been sending letters of admission in Spanish and English to families who request that for 2 years. We also send them a what's next trifold, so they see what they need to do in Spanish. And I would say, right, it's always on our mind, how are we going to attract all of Washington? And then I mentioned this, and it probably was maybe too quickly, but we understand what is happening with the demographics of those who are going to college, not just in Washington. In fact, Washington's clip is somewhat muted, if you will, but in the nation at large, all of us who do this understand you have to be able to attract students who might normally not think of college as their next step. And so, I mean, we're intentional. I think we do a pretty good job of it. I think the data bears it out. We're gonna have to keep getting better. I mean, obviously. So let me say one more thing about the Washington College grant, because Joyce Scurry would say, why didn't you say this? We always watch this number. So when we see students coming in and they have the grant, the reason we watch it so closely is if we've given them some award from WSU and they get the grant, we will take, you can hear me, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
We will actually substitute money. So it helps us in the long run, right? They're not losing anything. So we understand why it's important to look at that. So.
We are going to move on. Sachi, thank
Yep.
you.
Thank you
Great
very much.
Actually,
report.
I do want to just, I'm sorry, I need to say something here. I've been trying to interject. So number one, Enrique, to large part of your question, I'm heavily involved in FAFSA completion in Spokane and in Eastern Washington. We're 47th or 48th in the United States for completing FAFSA. So it doesn't matter if you have these grants available. If you're not able to complete the FAFSA form, which is the single biggest barrier, in particular to our students who do not, have families that speak English, we have to get over the hurdle of how we help and provide access for families to complete FAFSA. That's number one. Number two, Saichi, I just continue to push on this as I'm a part of the organization of Launch Northwest. We've raised $51 million in Spokane, Washington alone for the endowment of any high school student in Eastern Washington that completes FAFSA. We guarantee them we will close their final mile. We just admitted 44 kids to WSU with the final mile scholarships this year. And STCU, we keep our credit union open at night for families to come in and complete FAFSA. And we are seeing our greatest attendance in Pasco and in Brewster and in Moses Lake. So just work with the private sector and help us continue to launch this, because I think for Eastern Washington, this is the slam dunk of kids who want to be at Washington State University, and there's ways to get them access, but it's got to be done through FAFSA completion.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you. Impressive. So we're going to hear from Provost Riley Tillman, the preview for the 24-25 year.
Sure. I think I have a slideshow, but I don't know who's controlling it or how it's being controlled. So, okay. So evidently, I start this off. This is where I'm supposed to introduce myself to the board, and I'm supposed to introduce myself to Washington State University writ large. I did have a wonderful plan of being thank you very much, on a listening tour for 90 days and not really doing anything. And I was disabused of that notion very quickly. And so it feels a little odd to be introducing myself at this point where I think we're already knee deep into a lot of things. The only thing I'd like to think about here is, it's interesting, a lot of these conversations dovetail together. The first few slides are really about my background and about why I was interested in Washington State University. I would say the most interesting thing on this slide is where I actually went to university. I went to Ithaca College in upstate New York, and I got my PhD from Syracuse University. I started working in the public sector. I've never worked at a private university since getting my degrees at a private university at Temple University. And I would love to say it was because I was deeply committed to a model of education that focused on social mobility, or a variety of honorable reasons of why I went into that. The reality is they gave me a job, and I was really excited to have a job in Philadelphia. Seemed kind of cool. And, I was surprised in my time at Temple, when Temple is a very good university. It focused on an acres of diamonds mentality, the idea that it's really the city college of Philadelphia. And I really loved that aspect of what universities can focus on in terms of social mobility and really changing the lives of families and of individuals, and of whole communities when fully successfully accomplished. All of my areas of research are within special education, areas of challenge within the school structure, special education and school failure tend to deeply align with a lot of the areas that we want to focus on as a university. And so it was interesting when I started looking for a provost position. My wife and I talked about, like, would you go back to Syracuse and be provost? And there was always the joke about private school salaries and that those could be somewhat motivating. But I would have a really difficult time leading an institution in my particular role with $75,000 tuition, with massive debt on the side, a lot of different career areas that don't actually produce degrees that lead directly into employment. And look, at my previous job as Dean of a College of Arts and Science, I love the fact that we had a 99.9% employment rate, right? I love that when we were graduating 450 teachers, they were going to go out and impact the lives of kids and families in the area. And so, the challenge with that is that if when you're at a university like Syracuse, it's a pretty linear model. It's a pretty clean and concise population that you're working with. Any highly exclusive institution is going to end up with a pretty homogeneous population in who they're working with. And so whether we're talking about trying to get people in the door, or we're talking about retention, or we're talking about faculty or student success or alumni, we just have far more challenging situations in a university like Washington State University than we would at a private institution or a so-called elite public institution. So I guess I can do the next slide. The most attractive element to me when I came here was the system model. There's obviously, I think, some different viewpoints on the strengths or the weaknesses or the challenges with the system model. But from the outside, I worked in a system previously at Mizzou of where we had 4 separate universities. They're just 4 separate universities. We didn't actually do anything together. We didn't, it wasn't like you could leverage the strengths of one place, on another. We had 3 separate nursing schools with 3 separate sets of nursing school deans, which are very difficult to get. And when I saw what was being not attempted, because we're 35 years into this, it's not an attempt anymore. This is what Washington State University does. I realized from the outset just how incredibly unique this is and how this truly embodies what a land-grant university ought to be, right? If you were to build a land-grant university today, nobody would put it in Columbia, Missouri, or just in Pullman, but you would situate it across the state so it could really work with all of those different populations, all of the different diversity across the state. That was the most exciting thing walking in the door. It's also proves to be one of our more challenging things to work with on a daily basis. But as Kirk, I believe, mentioned before in the public session, or maybe it was in side conversations, we are relatively early on in the construct of what one WSU will be, right? So I feel like we're far enough along the pathway that everybody thinks we should be accomplished or done. I was talking with Mel at lunch last week. We look at our Vancouver campus. How many years old is it, Mel? 35 years old. People talk about South Florida, the University of South Florida is an extraordinarily young university. It was built in the 50s, right? And it's given lots of freedom because it's young. We look at our campuses, we're talking, they're really at the stage of where Pullman would have been at the turn of the 19th century. Right. So the amount of progress where we are, looking at the different opportunities we have coming in from the outside, it's an extraordinary amount of achievement. I think sometimes that might be lost a little bit on the inside. So getting down to practical stuff. So this is the slide of where my team tries to humanize me. I actually have a family. I think, we got some pictures of where I'm balding, so that's very exciting. We'll go ahead and move on from that one. All right, and so onto the one slide, I'm actually going to talk just briefly on this. I really want to have the opportunity for conversation before we move into future topics. I think there's a lot of areas walking in the door of where we have opportunities to become more efficient that don't require large scale initiatives, that don't require a consulting company. They do unfortunately require committees. That, is something we're just going to have to deal with. One is just system-wide engagement. I'm seeing Mel and Sandra right there. We've talked about a lot. A lot of this is just communication and actually nailing down the obligations of everybody who's working at WSU to truly work collaboratively across the system. That requires deans to be collaborative. It requires chancellors to be, and then more importantly, every subset below them to also have a collaborative approach as we move forward. I think there's some ways that we can do this a little bit more effectively. But honestly, in 12 or 13 weeks, I've been pleased at where I see us moving. I think we have a very different tint on the idea of our system NIST or some of our system challenges than we did this summer or this previous year. And I'm really excited to where we're moving forward. One area of where I think we're going to be able to lean heavily into the system structure and see some real strengths. And I hinted at this when we were talking about retention before. I think we're very good right now at looking at taking advantage of the different opportunities that exist on each one of our campuses or each one of our colleges. What we struggle with is having a consistent model that is in place in each location, present in each situation. So with advising, I think there's a lot of room that we can move forward. I think there's a number of things that come out of the provost office that we can do that could prove to be very effective. The two that I want to focus on quickly here are the what I call program optimization. I'm usually asked by faculty if that means that we're going to dump a lot of money into programs. The answer to that is no. That's not what I mean by optimization. Sometimes you optimize by investing in, sometimes you optimize by divesting from. But really trying to understand where we have strengths and weaknesses. And the other is workload standards and policies. I want to hit those two things separately. Where we are right now in terms of when Kirk talked about doing a program review or an academic review, we struggle as a university to have an agreed set of actual data outcomes for what we consider success across our different core operations. And so Kim and Mike's presentation before on research actually represents an incredible step forward on a combined, unified understanding of what do we mean by research strengths and success. And what Kim didn't dive into with that was the work she did in establishing that report, which required a lot of communication and a lot of input both across colleges and across all of the campuses so that we could come to a shared vision on what we consider our research strengths. The fact that that report has been received generally positively is a sign of the quality of the work that was done. And I think it's also a sign that generally speaking, our university is or would like to have a clear set of goalpost guidelines. What is it exactly we mean by a successful department or program or college or campus? What are the particular key performance indicators that we're going to utilize? And so what we're going to do across this year is essentially develop what those are. So our goal at the end of this is to have a dashboard of where we can do a series of quick formative assessments. I'm not an enormous fan of 5-year review or 7-year review. It's very hard to actually shift and move. But to do that, you have to have a common set of data that you use over and over again. That means us saying, here's what we value in terms of research productivity. And again, I think Kim's work and Mike's work has moved us toward that conversation, but we need to codify that on what are the 3, 4, 5 pieces of data that from a university level, we consider true research productivity. We don't have that information right now. And Jeanette, you asked before how much room there is for research growth. And the area of where I think we have the most research potential are in fields where we have not transitioned into some modern research productivity where there is certainly the availability of that productivity. But what that requires is that as a university, we make a statement that, for example, we expect grant applications, PI ships, et cetera, for research success in all fields of where that's available and present. We haven't made that statement as a university at this point. And so we have a finite number of PIs going after research funding. And we have areas, and Kim can attest to this, where particularly in the social sciences across a number of areas of where there are massive opportunities. We have high quality faculty doing interesting work, but it's simply not the culture and tradition in those units or departments to go after grant funding. Had an incredibly exciting conversation within the business college leadership about why the business school is not more aggressively engaging in grant-funded research projects. There's certainly a skill set there that would be tremendously valuable on the research projects we're doing. It's just not a part of the culture. And so what we're trying to establish here through data outcomes and through a process that will involve faculty senate, all of the campuses, all of the colleges, et cetera, is to establish what those outcomes are. In my view, I'm a behavioral psychologist by trade. If you know what the outcomes are, you start to establish the culture. As an assistant professor, if I know what I'm going to be judged on to be promoted as a research scientist for my promotion, et cetera, that's what I'm going to work to. If I'm told that grant productivity is not one of the core ideas for this unit, I'm not going to apply for grants, right? I'm going to do something else. And so we need to go through the process of establishing what those indicators are. We've had some really good conversations already. We've talked with chairs, we've talked with deans, we've talked with faculty senate exec about this already. I've been very pleased with the reception on this. I haven't had any sand kicked in my, well, a little bit of sand kicked in my face, but not too much. One of the great questions is, okay, what do you do with this? And the answer is really everything. This should be used for budgetary decisions. This should be used for annual raises of when those opportunities exist. This should be used for what departments are we going to increase in size or decrease in size. This should be used for how we consider dean performance or administrator performance. But without this data, it's very difficult to make those decisions. Last point on this, I want this to be a very small number of data points. This is actually my research expertise area. You cannot do formative assessment with 40, 50, 60 data points. There's too much noise in the data. We should be looking for things like blood pressure, right? Blood pressure is a great general outcome measure, which is a nice way to consider health. And then when something happens wrong there, temperature is another version. When something is off with that, then you start to dive in and do more specific assessment to understand the strengths and the weaknesses. And so one of the challenges for this committee is it cannot just come up with 75 different variables for research so everybody is placated all over the place. We've got to nail down the key pieces. On the student success side, we are going to be tempted to have 25 variables. We need 4 or 5 really core variables that we can focus on that will encapture all of those. And you nailed a number of them when you were saying we look at first year to second year, but we need to look at 4-year, we need to look at 6-year, we need to look at Pell. So that will be a challenge because oftentimes when people are given these, they come back with a dashboard with 75 data points, and that will be sent back. And we're going to need something thinned out that we can use much more expediently. The workload standards and policy piece. This is an area of where we have a tremendous opportunity. I'll say that in the positive version. We don't have a standard workload policy, or more specifically, we have a standard workload policy that chairs determine what the standard workload policy is. That is how universities have historically worked. It is, if we're being honest, how universities that sit on massive amounts of money continue to work. If we had a $50 billion endowment and we had a relatively homogeneous population that we worked with, you can kind of let people do what they're going to do and it works. When you work in places that matter more, like Washington State University, with more opportunistic but sometimes challenging population of either students or fiscal scenarios or so on and so forth, and with more stakeholders who want you to do more and more and more, right? Syracuse doesn't worry much about statewide stakeholders. Obviously, that's our bread and butter. It puts you into a situation of where every decision for every staff member, every faculty member really becomes magnified, right? If you make an error, it has much more of an impact than in a place of where you can just throw money at a problem and get more. We have really nice defined versions of workload standards at other comparable universities. I don't want to go into the peer university challenge right now, but we can look at universities like ours who have very, very good workload policies. The two key things I want to hit on this is, number one, I've been thrilled at the reaction of deans, chancellors, chairs and directors, and also faculty senate exec. I haven't talked to any population, or when I'm going to colleges and I'm talking to faculty writ large, where I haven't received a lot of smiles and a lot of head nods and a lot of excitement that we're going to start to do this work. When you do not have workload policies, you inevitably end up with extreme equity problems across units. Those equity problems are incredibly corrosive. We can say at the university level, or we can say at the college level, but it's really the individual unit level of where people know exactly who's doing the extra work. I hate the term invisible labor because it insinuates that we can't see the labor. We can see the labor. We simply do not track it. We do not value it enough as an institution to actually recognize its existence. But if you go into a department, they will tell you who's advising more, who's meeting with students more, and who hasn't had a student in X amount of time, or who isn't doing any research and still teaching on a 1-1, or on and on and on, right? They know that exists, and it's incredibly corrosive at a local level on the culture. At a macro level, we simply do not have the resources or funds to waste what is state money on individuals who are not performing a full workload. Now, I want to be very careful because this is public. I don't think that the majority of our faculty and staff are not doing exceptional work. I think they are. But whether that number is 5% or 10% or 2%, that number of individuals that does not meet those standards is incredibly problematic across the university. So one of the major goals of this will be able to start actually talking about equitable workload distributions. But without standards, without policies, it's impossible to do that. So the academic affairs program optimization I expect to have done as we go into this summer. I want to have that information ready for the next president so they can utilize it for a variety of different opportunities that they're interested in moving into. We'll let that individual decide what directions those go into. We think the workload standards and policies piece will take several years. This will involve significant faculty governments. I don't think this is as simple as me saying, here's what the policy is. It's now put onto the entire university system. I don't think that would go over incredibly well. I think it's important that we have the same type of buy-in that Kim and Mike and their team had on the research report so that people really understand the opportunities that will exist. And this does not appear as just a strategy to make faculty work more or get faculty to teach more or something of that nature. That could put us into a pretty difficult situation. I could keep going on this. Doug launched an initiative so that we start actually looking at exit interviews in a consistent manner so we know what we're losing people. There's just a lot of different pieces that we're going to go through of where I think we can have a more efficient and modern academic operation. But I think those are two good highlighted versions that hopefully will give us a little bit of time for discussion, and I'll stop.
That's great. No, let's questions for Chris.
Do you form a subcommittee? How do you go about really setting the table for the discussion on the workload process?
On both of those two processes, we have on the program optimization, we're at the what I would call a culturation stage. So I have talked with chairs, chancellors, VCAs of each campus, faculty senate exec, department chairs, and department leaders. We will release what the actual procedure will look like next week. It will involve creating a subcommittee. We are taking the work that Kim and Mike did and using that as a framework so that we go down a similar pathway. We will utilize that work as a important step into this work. So we're not going to redo all of that work and then also jump into teaching, engagement, and the different core operations that we have. But we will take it the next step to turn it into specific KPIs, although that information is very, very close to that. So on workload, it's a similar thing. Both of these will involve faculty senate significantly. With faculty workload, we're now solidly in that inner space between faculty governance and administrative governance, and we want to work together. That's going to take a little bit longer. We also want to make sure that we don't confuse these two things, and so that will be launched a month later. I don't know if that's long enough not to confuse the two things, but I get anxious about waiting longer. And so we'll have a similar process. In my shop, KP is running the program optimization piece. Doug Hall is running the workload piece. We strategically did that so we have a different head so that we're not confusing those two operations. And I'm really excited with where we are on each one of them. But yeah, it's a lot of that.
Anyone else?
Chris, you've been here 3 months now. Talk a little bit about, you had some initial impressions right when you first got here. We talked about academic buildings, for example, and it's just when somebody comes from a different place, there are certain things you see that you go, wow, this is amazing. And certain things you go, boy, this needs some work. Just kind of curious now after a few months, your impressions of WSU and our opportunities and strengths.
Yeah, it's interesting what you remember as you kind of progress through this transition. And so we were watching the Hall of Fame inductions, and they've got the great Mike Leach, why WSU? Well, that's a stupid question. And the part of my interview that keeps it's so awesome. The part of my interview that I keep going back to that I remembered, and I don't know if Mike is still on, he was moderating this, but the last question I got in the forum was, how are you going to repair the national reputation of WSU? And I thought I was like super well prepared for the interview, and I got the job, so I guess it worked out okay. But that question really threw me for a loop. And I didn't know at the time, I almost landed the plane on this beautifully. And I said, I honestly don't know what the hell you're talking about. And if I would have stopped then, it would have been kind of like Coach Leach, and that would have been awesome. But I'm a faculty member, so I monologued for 25 more minutes and ruined anything that I did. But honestly, that's where I am right now. Like, I walk around this campus and I'm gobsmacked at a whole variety of this campus. My first event at WSU was at the Vancouver campus. Mel left. And I walked on that campus like, what the heck is this place? This is one of the most beautiful places I've ever seen in my life. And right across my building, we've got a building being built by the federal government, paid for by the federal government. People here think that's normal. That's not normal. Okay, I'm just telling you, like, that's not, Mizzou hadn't built a building in 20 years. We hadn't built a single building in 20 years. And here we're like, gosh, okay, we've got one going up, we've got another one going up, and we got to get that next one. We got to do this and do this. So, I think we're in an extraordinarily good position. I've talked about this in previous board meetings. I think the work Leslie's doing in truly understanding our fiscal situation is not typical at other universities. We have better fiscal information today. I know Leslie's going to say it's not good enough right now. I want to have this, I want to have that. I fully believe her. We have better fiscal information here than what we had at Mizzou. I think we've got a better understanding of where we are. That's scary sometimes. It's challenging sometimes, but the people are amazing. I'm more and more convinced that the system-wide structure. I think if you look at the system-wide structure, if you look at the med school, if you look at some of the other pieces and challenges we have, 30 years from now, people are going to look back and be like, "Oh God, those were great." Of course, people did that. They're not going to realize the challenges that everybody impact, but. As I've told multiple people in the room, I'm a lot more excited in this job now than I was 3 months ago. And that's saying a lot because I was really giddy about, getting the job and coming up here. So I think we're in great shape. I do wish, and I don't know how to do this in the right way. I wish we were as good at recognizing how amazing what we do is and how atypical what we do is as we are as recognizing where our challenges are, where our frustrations are, where we might fall short on something. I think we're extraordinarily harder on ourselves than in some instances we should be. So that's my take. In 3 more months, I might have an entirely different one, and you can ask me then and we go from there. So,
yes.
So I just wanted to share that oftentimes enthusiasm and positivity is a tone from the top that becomes contagious. And your onboarding, I've heard you're present. You spend the time when folks are looking for time with you and they don't feel rushed. They feel as though they're being heard. And you'll continue to need to balance the realities of the challenges with the opportunities and the strengths that WSU offers. And so I just would say how grateful I am that you have chosen WSU and that you are coming in with this level of enthusiasm for what we do and how we do it and what really makes us great. And I do think that sometimes we get lost in some of the challenges and we don't stop to celebrate as much as we should. And so in this moment, as you are onboarding, just continuing to bring that energy is just very refreshing. So thank you.
Sure. Thank you.
Well said. Anyone else? Stay there. Great report. We're going to now move into accreditation and kind of our update on our 6-year schedule. And we're going to invite Bill Davis. Bill, welcome. Bill is the Vice Provost for Academic Engagement and Student Achievement, and it's a new position for Bill. So congratulations with that.
So there are 2 points on this. I'm actually going to go to the second one in the information item first. And so we have made an alteration in relation to our accreditation liaison officer. Bill has taken over as our university one. I want to thank Craig Parks for his great work. One of the things that I recognized in my first couple of months here is the importance to have that be specifically under an associate provost title and have that be a dedicated thing in an office right next to mine or two down from mine so that we can consistently talk about it. Accreditation issues, we talk about 3-year reports and 6-year reports and 9-year reports and whatever the different thing is. There's a billion different pieces and it's kind of consistently going. I think many of the board members know that. And so there's an ongoing component about that. So I'm really excited. I think Bill is going to be absolutely fantastic at that. In terms of our overall, do you want to just give an overview of the university accreditation and where we are in terms of our 6-year and the change there?
Yeah, so we were scheduled, many of you remember seeing a year 6 report last year. What NWCCU is elected to do is, because they've switched now to this year 6 and year 7 plan, and they used to just do the year 7, they found that they needed some extra space because they've changed some of their standards and things like that. And so they were looking to delay a set of schools so that they could better schedule out the timing of this, because now they have a little bit more work to do on that front. I think our strengths in accreditation and our previous work with NWCCU set us up well to be selected as one of the schools that would be delayed in this process. And so right now, instead of going into year 7 in spring 2025, which is next spring, we will be doing our year 6 next fall. You will be seeing updated materials based on the work that Craig Parks and his team put together to pull that together. That will come to the Board of Regents. That will go into NWCCU in the spring of 26. Fall of 27, we'll have our year 7 report. And then fall of 2026, you'll see that report. Spring of 27, we'll have our site visit and our year 7 submission. So that's the delay. It's for 2 years. So you'll see a lot more about NWCCU reporting starting next fall in 25.
Okay, questions on that? It's a change.
I think it puts us in a really good situation.
Good.
I think it's going to give we would have been fine. And we were certainly prepared, but I think it gives us a great opportunity to look at some of that. It gives Bill a great opportunity to really get solidified in this role. And we've already been talking about some good ideas of how we can utilize this for the overall benefit of the university.
Terrific. Thank you, Bill.
Thanks, Bill.
Short and sweet. One last discussion item regarding the presidential delegated authority, and I'll turn it back to you.
The last is on faculty manual revisions, and there were some faculty manual revisions. Judy would like us to do more faculty manual revisions. I think your version is we burn it up and then we just rebuild it or something like that. But
Scissors and paper.
Scissors and bit, right, something like that. We could have an event over it. We could that might actually get everybody involved together and some togetherness and some excitement. We wanted to ensure that it was compliant with Title IX modifications within the Department of Education. We did need to do some modifications and some changes. There were some minor formatting modifications. And so those were passed by the Faculty Senate Steering Committee on August the 16th, 2024. And the red line copy as presented to President Schultz for his consideration is available upon request. And so that is an item that we've altered. We're comfortable with the direction we've gone with that. And in the event other than redo of the entire structure, it's the one alteration that we've got this time around.
Do you want to share a quick version of what you think needs to happen?
Oh,
A quick?
Okay.
Yeah.
So what we tend to do when we edit the faculty manual is take what's there and try to massage it slightly to get it to where we want it to be.
Yeah.
And it just feels like a really tattered, worn patchwork quilt.
Yeah.
And it would be really nice to have a concise, well-organized, precise document that does not conflict with policies that have been updated that we didn't know about.
Right. One of the, looking back at my previous job, we had a very historic version of the P&T process in what we called our collected rules and regulations here. It's the faculty manual. And so, for example, the provost there didn't even technically look at P&T, even though they had looked at P&T for 50 years. You know what I mean? Like it just didn't work. I think the real concerning thing about the historical nature of these things is that oftentimes there is significant, built-in racism, sexism, et cetera, in the actual policies themselves. Mm-hmm. The way they were written and formatted and structured and the way you go about your business. And when you just build on those, it's easy to miss. And so the best example I can give at my previous university, faculty did not all have the right to see the letters written recommending their promotion or not promotion at each level, yet they had the legal right to appeal. So they couldn't see the actual letters explaining why there was a no, but they theoretically could appeal. This is obviously an extreme, it just doesn't work. But it took some significant changes just to fix that little oddity that was in there that nobody was really paying attention to. And I mean, Judy and I could probably go through 100 of these that are in there. It's just, it's just when to find the time exactly to redo the whole thing. That's the tough part. So.
Thank you, Madam Chair. That's it. And we're 2 minutes ahead of time.
I was just going to say that since I've gotten a couple messages that perhaps we need another break. So that is exactly what we're going to do. Excellent job, Regent Pika. We will start again at 2:15 and we will head into our finance discussion. So if you need to grab some coffee or a treat, now's the time. Thanks. to come.
And Regent Cerna. So we put a lot of work into this package, hence my 3 screens here. We have 350 pages of content that the team has worked really hard on. And so I just want to compliment the team. And Heather, turn it over to you because I know you have some great information for us, and I'd like to also recognize your work as we go through your report. Thanks.
Sorry to add to that. There you go. All right. Sorry to add to that content. I think some of the reports are pretty lengthy in there. First, I appreciate the board, and this year I'll be presenting to you a few times instead of just twice during the year. So I really look forward to that and hope I can bring you some good information. This report, I have 3 things. I have the fiscal year 25 audit plan and 2 external audit reports. I'll talk about those external audit reports first. As a reminder, our office provides audit services in the areas of obviously audits, assurance audits. We also do investigations, advisory services, and external audit liaison. We're the primary liaison with the state auditor. As I have reported multiple times over the last couple of years, we have had a lot of visits from our external auditors, especially the state auditor, and very happy to have these 2 reports in this package to present to you. Very good results on both of them for the university, and that is in no small part because of management and employees and programs across the system. Both of these audits were significant in the amount of time, the requests by the audit teams, the scope, and just the breadth of the areas that they were looking at, and the results were just tremendous. The first one is the accountability audit. It's a 2-year audit, but we have had an accountability audit 3 years in a row, even though all of them have been 2 years. They've just been kind of delayed. So we're finally catching up, or the state auditor is finally catching up. This one was the scope of fiscal year 22-23. And the audit team had a budget. They were under budget when they closed up the audit. Part of it is because they had actually budgeted for travel dollars, and they did not have to travel as much and be on site as much as they had planned. They were able to achieve their audit objectives as desired without having that on-site time. The whole of the audit, there were a lot of areas that were reviewed. We had only 2 recommendations. And Regent Ramos, she was at the entrance and the closing meeting, so got to ask questions of the auditor as needed about the audit and the teams and the work that WSU does. There was one area that I wanted to kind of point out. There were questions about Workday on this particular audit. So this is the first state accountability audit that we are completely in the Workday environment when they came in and did their work. The auditors did not actually go into Workday and audit from like looking at the systems. They were able to rely very much on just doing Zoom meetings and walking through with departments about the processes, and then relied really on the transactions, the reports that came out of the system, the output. It'll be a little bit different the next time they come around. Again, this is a 2-year audit. They will be back again for fiscal year 24-25, and they'll be back in 2026. The state of Washington is going through a transition just like what we did several years ago. The state of Washington as a whole is the One Washington They are moving from a very antiquated financial system into Workday. And there was recently a performance audit, it was just communicated on yesterday, about that transition and how ready the state is for that move. And there were recommendations from staff at WSU and UW, two very big entities in the state of Washington that had moved into Workday. Those recommendations were more training. Make sure that you're ready before you go in. But the report that the state auditor put out about the readiness for the state to go into Workday, it really highlighted, I think it made WSU look pretty well, and talked about WSU's readiness and embracing of Workday. When they come back, when the state auditors come back for the accountability, they'll have a little bit more operationally on their audit teams, their feet in the water per se in the Workday environment. So I think they'll be more ready to kind of test it out and start walking through the business processes within the system. On this particular audit, they were really relying on the output in the transactional activity. Did you have maybe any questions or comments from the closing meeting from the accountability audit?
Let me just add an observation. The state auditor was just positive and complimentary about the WSU team, the responsiveness, the top-down tone of just ethical management and integrity of the books. So, you know, it's a tall order to pass a 2-year accountability audit. And we should take this moment and celebrate it. So.
So that is to management. And again, it does take a lot of effort on management units. The auditors, the audit team was only 1,000 hours, but at the university, at the operational level, tremendous amount of work. Our office was liaison, but it's really at the unit level. And one I forgot to mention before in our prep, but Matt Skinner had brought it up. Angie Dobbins is the controller, and she started at WSU last fall, and she was a co-liaison throughout that review. And so she was very tremendous with her and her team in engaging and answering questions on activities she had no part of. She wasn't here during the scope period. So yes, overall, it was a terrific audit, and we look forward to not seeing them again until 2026. So the other audit was the performance audit on, and I have the title, it was a long title, Running Start in College and the High School Assessing Dual Credit Transferability. It was a long-awaited report. That audit had been in the works for over 1.5 years. It covered 8 college and universities across the state. Basically, their objective was to look at where the barriers were to transferring credit that high school students are earning while they're in high school, transferring those into colleges. There were many limitations with what the state auditor could work with, and their scope was actually pretty, it was broad in the number of universities and the data sets we're talking about, but pretty narrow on what they were focusing on. They were really just looking the credits that were earned, where they transferred into the college where they chose in Washington. They can't look at, at colleges that they went somewhere else. Overall, again, on this one, huge amount of work at unit level across the system for running. We don't have college in the high school, but we do have Running Start. And for the years that they looked at, fiscal year 21, 22, and 22, Pullman had on average 35 to 45 students in Running Start, and then Tri-Cities 3 times that amount. These are great opportunities for high school students. I think the initial fear was that by the auditor looking at it, they might come back with some recommendations that would compromise the value of that program that gives high school students a head start in their college career. The end results, though, were really some pretty benign recommendations for really back to the parents and the students to be a little bit more informed. There have been some articles over the last 1.5 years, and then even in the last couple of weeks about college and the high school and other programs like that. I would encourage to take a look at There's a lot of emphasis to, just one more place to go to bring in those students into our colleges. And they're terrific opportunities for the university. The folks over in our admissions registrar, provost office, they all work very hard to develop those programs and make sure that where possible with the information that the university does have access to, that they're bringing those students in and giving them the credit that they need. So no recommendations on that one. To WSU, there were 2 areas that there were exceptions, and WSU management fixed them during the audit, so they gave credit for that. So again, a lot of effort on that one, but we're so glad it's done. The report's out there, and we'll move on and see where the state goes in direction for those programs that are really, really helpful to high school students.
If I could just add, I have a 17-year-old that would like quick admittance into WSU, but she's a Running Start student. And so I had an opportunity last night to talk to one of our students who's a freshman who did the transfer from Bellevue Community College, and was asking him, what's your experience? She's kind of starting to lean away from anyone that isn't on the Common App because it's easy and it's fast. And that will take the college credits that she's earned over the last 2 years while finishing her high school degree. And his experience was, it was seamless. And there was only one class that I wasn't able to transfer, but I essentially started at WSU as a junior, and I'm loving all of what I'm learning. And so it's just kind of the qualitative, in addition to what you're saying in terms of the audit, from a parent perspective, that's 2 years off of college, and she wants to head straight to law school right after she graduates. And so for us, it's a real asset. And then to have WSU as the preferred school that's going to make it easy for you to have your college credits transfer and to be welcomed here. The experience that this one student had was just really phenomenal. So it's really great to hear that the state's continuing to do that, and that we are meeting the audit requirements.
Right. I agree, and hope the state continues those programs. There's been some emphasis on the college and the high school. Again, we don't participate in that. It's mostly Running Start here. I've had similar feedback from folks that have had that experience. We had an intern a couple of years ago that she did her first 2 years, and she entered as a junior as well at WSU. Did the Running Start with WSU courses. That was, of course, her choice to go to WSU. So awesome. All right. Yes.
You just mentioned that WSU doesn't do college in the classroom, but do they accept credits, or they don't even accept the credits?
It's college in the high school. And
yeah,
so the difference in college and the high school, I didn't get too much in the programmatic, and I would really defer to the provost office to address that. Vice Provost Bill Davis here, he was very close to that. On the college and the high school, though, there's it's in the classroom, it's in the high school. Running Start, the kids actually come to WSU and take the courses. The education, the cost of the education follows them for Running Start from K-12 into the college classroom. In college and the high school, the university or college is bearing the cost. So there's a budget figure to it.
We could go.
Yes. Anything else on those 2 reports? All right. The last one is the fiscal year 25 audit plan. Heard a lot this morning and today in a lot of the presentations about risk, and a lot of the presentations were touching on areas that kind of came up in our risk assessments. Well, they would, because we really piggyback off of the enterprise risk assessment. Our job is to assist management. Our mission is to help management in identifying where there is risk, in trying to find solutions. And so we do lean very heavily on that enterprise risk management, the risk register, to identify where is management already said there's some problems. Where can we add some value by maybe going in and digging in on those barriers or other bottlenecks that they weren't aware of, or that they're aware of, but they don't know how to exactly address it. We do have a few places on our audit plan that you will see the scope and objective is a little bit unsure right now. We know enrollment management, we know tuition, we know compensation are high to, areas that a lot of management have talked about as risk. we're going to have more conversations with leadership and management when we engage those audits. Right now, we're working on the compensation one. But we have more conversations to talk about where is it really that you have a concern and where can we help? Any place that we can add value, that's where we're going to focus our resources on while management works on maybe task force and developing the overall program objectives. We're here for support. So you'll hear some more about some of those ones, especially the scope and objective as those get refined. And I look forward to our next meeting in November and giving you some results of some of the audits that we have engaged so far.
Great. Any more questions? Thank you, Heather. Appreciate everything that you're doing.
All right. Thank you.
Our next information item is the fiscal year 25 budget document. So we have with us here our Chief Financial Officer, Leslie Brunelli, and Chris. I've lost your title here, Chris Jones.
Yeah.
Our
Thank
Vice President in the Finance Group.
There we go. Good afternoon, everyone. So the first item that we have before you today is in draft form. It is the fiscal 25 budget document. It is a lengthy document. Regent Ramus, I'm not sure how many pages you said this was, but this comprises 119 pages of the material that you have today. We just loaded it out in your portal yesterday afternoon, so obviously you have not had time to spend looking through it, and we are keeping it as a draft because we have the intent over the next couple of weeks to clean it up, make it a little bit more presentable, because our goal is to put this out on the web, on the Budget Office website, to increase the transparency of our budget discussions. Hopefully, as this document evolves and you move towards approval of the fiscal 26 budget, this is the vehicle by which you approve the budget. It is not intended to be a department level budget. You will not see the Department of English. You will not see how much I spend on pens. It's not that granular. Remember, we are a $1.3 billion entity, so this is at the high unit level, but it will split the budget into our core funds, what we use as the operating budget of the university, but it will also show non-core funds. And we're trying to build ourselves out to where we have an all funds presentation of our budget. Let's see, a lot of this information previously existed, and we've done the work to compile it here. So you've seen parts of this before. I mean, you obviously have always approved the tuition and fee schedules. You haven't probably seen them combined in the way that we have included them in this document. It's really important that that tuition and fee schedule be recognized as the official tuition and fee schedule of the university. It's what our bursar's office uses to actually bill all of our students. Right now, we have a challenge that there are multiple places where tuition and fees may be listed on the website, and some of those are not consistent with what we consider to be the official schedule. You'll see that in a future information item. Some additional information we have included is from our budget hearings back in the spring. This will look very familiar to you, Regent McDonald, as you went through all of those with us. We've included 4 years of each of our units prior budget, where they were budget to actual. But we've also included where they are for fiscal 25. We've left some spaces for placeholders, including in this, so that our units can actually provide some narrative, to provide some context about the unit that you can see. For all of the academic units, we've included their credit hour history, because that's a really important indicator. It's the output of the information. Kyle, do you mind pulling up the one-page chart that I had prepared for this? Don't have many slides here, but I wanted to put the budget into a little bit more context, as you've seen us use it as a pie chart where the sources come from, and the colors are meaningful here. So this is the full university's budget, the $1.3 billion. And the green items are where the board should be focusing its attention on approving. The first and most important piece there is the majority of the budget, and that's the core funds operating budget. That's how the university operates. That is really the operating side of the entity. It does not include athletics, for instance. It does not include the grants. Those are in places below. But that is really the operating piece that the focus should be on, and that's where we've spent most of our time in this document. The 2 items that are in red, the grants and contracts and the gifts and distributions, those don't really need your approval because they are approved already. You have delegated authority for us to accept these things already. So the Office of Research takes in the grants and runs that through the year. But they're important because they do run through our financial system. The same things with the gifts and the distributions that come from the endowment. Those are gifts that we have accepted. They are to serve the university, but they are restricted by what the donor has said that we're going to do with those. So those are in red because you're not really approving those. The auxiliary enterprises is really critical here. It's 160 million. You approve a piece of that already. 74 million of that is this year's athletics budget. But you have not previously seen the detail on housing and dining's budget, Cougar Health Services budget, or parking and transportation. So those are in here as well. There's a handful of smaller auxiliaries. The bookie is one of them. We talked about the bookie earlier this morning, but the bulk of the auxiliary enterprises are those 4 major entities. Then you see some things in yellow, and they're in yellow because caution means something. These are smaller activities. Together, those 2 lines, sales and services and other, equal about 5% of the 1.3 billion. Because of capacity, we're not going to spend a great deal of time digging into those and getting them documented this year. That's next year's activity. But to give you an example of what some of those are, the Vet Med Hospital is in there. The Creamery is in there. Connors has lots and lots of sales and services around the state, and those are in there. So there's lots of smaller things there, but those are probably the 3 single largest things that you see. We will get those documented at the unit level, but they're not going to be available this year. So I just wanted to provide that as the overall context. You are already approving pieces of this. In the core funds operating budget, you approve our request to the state for state funds. And when we do that, we're telling you how we're going to use those state funds. That's already there. And of course, you've been approving the athletics budget, as we said before. So this is just to lay out what the context is of that budget. And we'll talk a little bit later about the ad hoc committee that's been set up to aid with Regents education. What's next for the budget document is we do need to do some cleanup. I want it to be a consistent look, not because it needs to be pretty, but because it needs to be able to be combined from the unit level to the campus level to the institutional level, the system, so that you can see it all the way up to the top. Intentionally, this document should have a look and feel like our financial statement, which you do receive every year, will be January 25 of this year. We want those to be pieces that this is the plan, this is the actual. They should always be looked at together. I think that's all the information that I have to share about the document. I welcome your review and comments about it. It is going to evolve over time. It shouldn't be noisy, but it should provide information that is valuable for us. I know Regent McDonald last year asked us for the MSI schedule for the last 10 years. It's in the document. And it's one of those things that people ask for it all the time. We need to have it available. It lives in the document now. Any questions?
Just thank you for doing this, because I think it's going to really be enlightening for us and very, very helpful.
Thank you, Regent Powell.
Any other questions on FY25? It's a whole new level of transparency and integration. I just have to thank you as well.
Thank you, Regent Ramos.
And thank you for finding ways to communicate it to us when we don't have the same level of understanding of finance that you do. So
Of course.
really appreciate it.
Of course, thank you.
Shall we move on to the
Yes,
next
please.
information item?
And we'll ask Matt Skinner to join us here at the table. So our next item is the current year's budget execution. I actually should read fiscal 25 because so our fiscal year started obviously on July 1. And as we came forward last year, we started providing you with real-time access to information. What does it look like at this point in the year compared to the same year, same period a year ago? Matt and Chris primarily have been working to pull this information together for us so that we have a consistent set of info. There are some slides here that you're going to see today, but we won't show them to you again. We will keep them in dashboard information for us, but we just want to be very clear about we are monitoring in a real-time way so that if we see anything that gives us alarm or pause, we are able to act quickly on that. So this is a review through August 31st. We will do this for ourselves every month, but each time that we come before you this year, we'll bring this to you with the most recent information that we can provide. It's highlights of key revenue and expense activity, and it will show the trends, and that's what we're trying to focus on. Matt will talk a little bit about the work that he has been working with our modernization team with Workday to build out additional reporting. We had the opportunity to show that to our system leadership collaborative, I guess it was last week, and we'll be bringing that to the dean soon, but also the area finance officers so they can see this real-time access to information. And just for refresher, you saw the budget one way for the 1.3 billion. Here it is by source of funds. And this has not changed since we delivered this to you back in June this year. State appropriations are our most significant contributor to the university's budget, followed closely by our tuition and fees, and then federal grants and contracts. When we think about that $671 million, it is the state appropriations, the tuition and fees, and a sliver of that federal grants, because that's the indirect cost recovery. And there's also our interest income and fees that we charge ourselves in there. And this is that core funds budget, the 671 million. This number has changed a little bit from what we showed you back in the month of June, because what we have done is gone through and trued it up to how fiscal 24 ended. So we know what our tuition is now. We know what our interest income was now, and we trued all that up. We also recognize the provisos from the state as they came in. So you saw a smaller number in June. This is the number as it is now. One thing that I want to point out, and you'll see it in some of the slides as we move forward, the F&A recovery, the indirect cost recovery that we have for grants, comes into a central general fund first, and then we push it out to the units based on where those dollars were generated. So this distorts what central looks like until it's moved out. We're thinking of ways to do that moving forward, and it's a little bit more consistent from this presentation. With that, I think I'm handing it to Matt. Do you want to drive, or do you want me to? You drive.
I'm going to do the first slide, if that's okay. So here we're looking at our financial performance. We'll be updating these as you all meet throughout the year. So our latest snapshot is August year to date, where the month ended in our Workday finance system. We're looking here at an annual financial budget of core funds of 671 million for this fiscal year, up 30 million from last year. Roughly the same rate of spending 2 months into the fiscal year, 14.7% as of August year to date, compared to 14.4% last year. Tuition revenues, a very significant source of our core funding. Last year, we budgeted 246.5 million. This fiscal year, we're budgeting slightly less at 244.1 million. The black bar chart is showing what we have billed. So we've billed roughly 5 million less than the same time last year, but we've collected around the same amount, 100.5 million. This is something we'll be monitoring monthly. We'll be monitoring tuition collections. Also in our office, the budget office, we run a tuition fee model. So we just got the census data, so we'll be running fall census through that and updating our tuition projections throughout the year.
And Chris, if you would clarify, this is my favorite chart that we just created. The $244.1 million, that is net of waivers?
That's true. This is net operating fee revenue. Saichi gave a lot more valuable context to our enrollments than I could, but obviously this is something we track closely as well because it informs our tuition model. Again, showing with our enrollment figures, new student enrollment up for this fall 2024. Our total fall enrollment is down over last year. We did project in our tuition model slightly lower overall enrollment, and that's why you saw that lower tuition budget for this fiscal year. And again, this is something we'll monitor throughout the year with each snapshot of our student enrollment.
All right, thanks, Chris. So we have 3 slide views looking at our research, our fiscal activities for research grants. So the first slide has a couple of good news moments in here. You'll recall we finished FY23 in the financial statements at 267 million in research revenue, which was a really high number for WSU, maybe our highest ever. We're projecting that we'll finish FY24 in the financial statements at that same level, which is really positive. We thought we'd see some fall off after FY23. So that's a good a good number for us there. And then we're tracking our research revenue through August very closely. We're pretty close there on our research revenue compared to where we'd be last year. We think that will steady back out as we get into the fall semester. The next view of grants, of course, all of our grants are what we call, most of our grants are cost reimbursable basis, which means we spend the money to do the research, then we need to invoice and collect the money back from the grant sponsor. So this is really important for us to watch this month to month how we're trending. The first in the anthracite color is our unbilled grant revenue. So we have incurred the expenses and now we produce the invoice out to each group. We're down just a little bit there. We'd like that number to be low, and we're monitoring that closely to see what is a good, what I call working capital number there. What is a reasonable amount of expenses that we're always kind of fronting for grants? 30 million a month kind of makes sense. We do 360 million a year. 30 million a month seems like a reasonable kind of unbilled level, but we're monitoring that closely. We also see some great progress here year over year in the accounts receivable. This has been a big point of emphasis over the last year for us. We have some new tools in place to help us get track those grant revenues better when they come in. We also have some support from the university to have more grant accountants, and we're seeing the effects of that we're collecting those funds from our sponsors more effectively this year so far. I called that anthracite. Chris called it black. I think in cougar colors, that's anthracite, isn't it? But that's what I would.
Exactly.
Okay, I'll do that better. I'll get the right color codes next time for that. That'll be good. But that looked like anthracite to me. That's good. Okay, so and we do have anthracite on this slide as well. So this is the third view of research. Of course, as we perform the research, we're able to charge an indirect cost recovery, and that comes back to the university. We are projecting we finished FY24 at about 44.4 million in total indirect cost recovery revenue from our grants. As Chris noted in that core budget that we talked about earlier, 44.4 million budgeted for this coming fiscal year that we're currently in. Then we're tracking our performance through 2 months. This year, we're off about 2% there between this August and last August. Not concerned about that trend yet. We'll continue to monitor that closely.
Thanks, Matt. I was just too nervous to pronounce anthracite. So looking at another source of our core funding, we have a pool of funds we call it administrative fees and interest. Miscellaneous fees get deposited here centrally, and also interest revenues. So this year we've budgeted 33.3 million, last year 31.6 million. Year to date, it shows we're tracking a little less than last year, but I will add some context here. We transferred some funds out earlier this year than we did last year. We transferred some of these revenues to pay for debt service. That's why that number looks lower at this point in time.
And before we leave that, I'll point out, we all are aware that the Fed lowered the interest rate yesterday by 50 basis points. That will have an effect here. We sort of think that we'll still be fine because it's been so much higher than our expectation, but it is something we'll have to watch.
So next, looking at how we're expending our core funds August year to date, seeing slightly higher spend on salaries and wages. We do know there were 2 mass salary increases applied, one for civil service employees, another for faculty and AP last year. So we're seeing, higher levels there. Benefits, we are aware that the employer contribution for health insurance would increase. So that's going to be a significant contributor there. Matt has another slide coming up with all funds, but you will see some lumpiness at the beginning of the year where maybe we're making more purchases in goods and services or equipment. But I will note that our utilities spend is looking down right now, 2 months into the year.
So then, as Leslie mentioned earlier, our goal is really to get into all funds that we're reporting and monitoring across all funds throughout the year, like we do on the financial statements. So here's a view of 2 months year over year on all funds expenditures. Just would highlight there in the payments to suppliers, purchase service, utilities, other goods and costs, those look like really big variances, 18% to 36%. But with just 1/6 of the fiscal year in place, just one large payment to a construction company can make those numbers look higher. during this year. So we're monitoring that closely as we're watching through midpoint in September. It looks like those are starting to equal back out again, which is what we'd expect. So over the next month or so, we'll have a better sense for how we're trending on operations. Salaries are up 4%, which Chris mentioned, and we'll take a closer look at that if I can go the right direction here. Oh, let's see, we're missing a slide there. Oh, there it is. Okay, it's just out of order. Here's the other slide that supports that. So looking at all of salaries and wage expense through August for different types of employees, we see classified as running up 4%. That's expected. We had that 3% salary increase for all classified employees. Administrative professional employees through August are up 5%, and faculty are up 1% in total salary expense. Those categories each are running on a head count basis through 2 months, up about 2% over last year. Again, it's really early in the year on both of those to judge any conclusions about actual trends.
Yeah, but the administrative professional and the faculty is showing last year's increase, which was October 1. That's in there already for last year, and it's not showing yet for this year because it doesn't happen until October 1. So you do see that increase as well.
And then, of course, graduate assistants are up a higher percentage. That's as a result of the new collective bargaining agreement, which was expected. And I'll jump back here. We have this is new data that we didn't show last spring as we continue to identify key financial metrics. A little context on this, the university operates a purchasing card program. We love the purchasing card program. It's a really effective way to buy goods and services at the department level, has much less administrative overhead costs than POs and checks and writing ACHs. It's a really good program for us. It also gives us some insights on what's happening from a goods and services perspective across the university. And so we'll be watching that total expenditure in red there to see if we're trending up or down versus last year. The other thing we watch closely is what we call unverified transactions. What that means is as a unit uses their purchase card, it comes in first, we pay off the credit card right away because we don't want to pay any late fees or interest to our credit card providing company. And then they do the process to assign those expenses back to their local departmental cost centers, programs, gifts, and contracts. So we monitor that verification process monthly to make sure everybody is turning those expenses into their budgets on a timely manner. We've seen a lot of improvement there over the last year. Then the last view of that is much smaller. The central travel account is very similar to the purchase card program. It applies just to airlines tickets for when folks are traveling in university business. So again, in red, it gives us a sense for what's happening from a travel perspective there, an early indicator. And the same process holds true there, that we want to see departments verifying those transactions quickly to get those expenses recognized in their budgets.
And let me add, these two new slides that we showed you here, you're probably not going to see them again in this context because it's really, really granular information. I just wanted to be able to show you that we're tracking things in a little bit different way than we have previously, because the trend here is what's really important to pick out.
I might add that P cards are also a favorite place of auditors to go dig for receipts.
Well, you may remember that internal audit did a very comprehensive audit last year of our P cards.
So to wrap up here, and Leslie, please jump in and help here. We're pretty upbeat about the progress we're making on reporting. We're continuing to define these dashboards and critical information that's meaningful to the board that helps you in your fiduciary responsibilities. We did roll out, as Leslie mentioned, our first standardized set of financial performance reports for core funds and core funds budget. Those are great because the views that you saw today at the Board of Regents, that same information is available to all units, campuses, and colleges, and they can drill down through into those to see their own college or department information and how they're doing. We rolled that out with finance officers and system leadership in the last 2 weeks, and now we'll be going through unit by unit to introduce those. Some other highlights here, we are just getting into the all funds revenue and expense tracking and how we can deliver those reports. We have lots of reports in that area, but how do we bring those together in a way that's meaningful and actionable for leadership? And under the leadership of our new controller, we are continuing to make progress on our quarterly financial statements. So won't be such an unknown when we get to the end of the year and the financial statements are done. We want to know how those are looking long before the financial statements are done. And then maybe one of Leslie's favorite topics is we have kicked off our project team for position control, position management functionality at the university, essentially helping us to get better data about how we're planning our staffing levels each year, and then to be able to monitor budget to actual as far as hiring and number of filled positions.
Before Matt leaves, are there any questions?
I just had a question. What is the ratio of our benefit package of employer paid versus employee paid?
We can get that.
Jennifer is going to get that for us while we are sitting here.
No worries. I just am curious to understand what that ratio looks like.
Go ahead, President Schultz.
Yeah, and Matt, I know you've been very, very involved in the Workday implementation, and how much of this is due to us, the style of your reporting, how much is that due to just continued flexing and building out the muscle on the skeleton of Workday?
Yeah, all of these reports are coming from Workday. So it's a combination of great tools and ability to see data differently than we have, and then great collaboration to work with the budget office, university accounting, human resources, all of us coming together. We meet multiple times a month to continue to get a holistic view of our financial trends. That's been great. And one thing I'd point out on that grant side where you saw unbilled versus build, we couldn't see unbilled in our legacy system very easy. So just being able to track that at that level is pretty remarkable.
I think Matt is being a little humble in his answer because recently I know Leslie and Matt and Chris and the whole team has essentially been receiving national recognition for Workday implementation and best practices and change management. So I don't know, Leslie, if you want to explain, but in the context of 10,000 clients, maybe nationally, Washington State University was selected as one of the top 3 Workday project successes. And there was a competition. And this is in the context of all businesses, not just university. We did win the university award. So
right.
do you want to?
Well, I'm going to actually let Matt speak to this. And this is really deep work that Matt and the modernization team, but really everyone across the campus has done. So these reports that we're rolling out, they have a group of people who sit and verify and make sure that the report is really saying what we think it's supposed to be saying. So there's a lot of people who have their hands in this. But to your point, the Workday Rising is going on right now. Matt will speak to our staff who are there. Our competition was Thomson Reuters and Lowe's. That's how significant that was.
Yeah, great. So that recognition was something Workday calls the Powering Innovation Award, which is to be honoring groundbreaking innovation in your sector. So that was awesome to have WSU there and our brand in front of 10,000 people right besides Lowe and Thomson Reuters. That was great. Our modernization team's down there this week. They're presenting on the particular tool, and it ties to our conversation this morning. So we received that recognition for something we do that we think is pioneering. It's the first ever grants forecasting system in the Workday platform, fully integrated there. And so that's exciting. It's great to think about how we're trying to support research better. That's also great. If I could just for a minute, this is not about patting ourselves on the back, but it's a nice recognition for WSU. It's a nice recognition for our modernization team. They're outstanding. They're on the phone with other higher education and now the state of Washington all the time, helping them out in their Workday space. And then what's, I guess, more exciting to me is I feel like great things happen as we listen together, as we work together, as we hear feedback from faculty and grant administrators and others about what works well and what could work better. As we open up that dialogue, great things happen. And that's how this came to be. We were out listening in listening sessions and someone said, wouldn't it be great if we had a single tool to help us forecast and track our grant spend over the life of a grant? And we said, yeah, that would be awesome. And so we went to work. We called other universities first and no one was doing this. And so then we kept working at it, and Deloitte joined us on a pro bono basis, helped us with 2 extra expert consultants, and this tool came to be. So quickly, a shout out to College of Vet Med, College of Medicine, Connors. They were involved at us at the table the entire time, thinking about how we'd want to forecast grants. And we've had good adoption so far. It's a great tool that's equal and equitable to every PI can use the tool for free, which is awesome. So thank you.
So I would invite us to give Matt and Leslie and team a round of applause.
Well, Matt, when you're throwing out big words and Pantone colors, they're gonna vote
Yeah.
for you. That's,
Yeah, that was a
yeah,
big step
that's, I'm
for
sure
me
was a
today.
huge selling point.
Yeah.
We heard finance say upbeat, lumpiness, and anthracite. So thank you.
Can they say anthracite? No, that's what I want.
Okay. So thanks. Can we transition into our next information item then? We're going to talk about the Doctor of Nursing practice tuition rate.
Yeah, and this will be very, very brief. So the Doctor of Nursing practice tuition rate was adjusted by the Regents in May of 2023 with the intent that it would be effective this fall of 24. We did put that change in and from the bursar's office, and students were billed at that rate. The challenge was it was not communicated clearly to the students who were affected, who were new entrants into the program. And so we made the decision along with the College of Nursing at the request to roll it back to the prior rate so that we could do the communication effectively. The change is about a $300,000 change. But it's not insignificant to us for sure as in the context of what we're talking about. But that highlights the emphasis on why we need one tuition and fee schedule recognized as the tuition and fee schedule and promulgated across the university as this is really the schedule and everything linked back to that. So this was just an information item.
Okay, shall we talk about the budget ad hoc committee?
Yes.
Along with Regent Cerna?
Yes, and I'll ask Regent Cerna to start, please.
Well, this is a new committee and we are charged with coming up with an kind of an education information process for the regents, the Board of Regents, as we head toward approving the budget this year. This is a new thing. We have met a couple of times, first to kind of establish direction. Leslie has been great to work with on this. She also asked that Daryl DeWald and Chris Riley Tillman be a part of this, so they joined in. The full committee is Regent Powell, along with faculty member Judy McDonald, and also Tracy Klein from Vancouver, who's the Senate chair, faculty Senate chair. So we are starting this process, and we will have continued meetings through the year. And then Leslie, anything else you want to add to this?
I don't think so. What we've done is tried to outline using that graphic that I showed you earlier that showed the core funds versus auxiliaries versus the other things. This is really where we're going to focus on core funds and the auxiliary enterprises. We've already had plans through the Strategic and Operational Excellence Committee and this committee to bring in some of those bigger things. I mean, obviously you hear from athletics at every meeting, but we need to hear from housing and dining, and we have that scheduled for January. We need to hear from human resources, for instance, and that'll be after that programmatic review. That'll be at the March meeting. So we're trying to put those in at the right times where it will make sense to have those conversations.
So we are started and we'll move ahead on this, and we need to set up our kind of meeting schedule here as we go forward, but we've started the process and I think it'll be good because I'm not a numbers guy, but this will be helpful to try to understand things. So great.
Great. Okay, so we're going to continue on to the budget planning discussion.
All right, this is actually item 6 is the committee work plan. And what we did this year was put together a file that will aid in building the agenda for this meeting, because this meeting tends to be pretty intentionally long. It's more than 2 hours in most cases. And we wanted to be sure that we had those times where we can talk about significant budget things, including housing and dining. We have spaces to talk about some endowment changes that are proposed to be coming forward from the investment committee of the foundation. We want to talk about carry forward in a more robust way and potential policies that might be put in place around that. And there's some other places to address items that you saw earlier in the enterprise risk management risk register, our top 10 risks. So we want to make sure that that space is there. Because this committee also approves tuition and fees, and tuition is not just tuition, it's plus the student fees, plus the CUB, plus the Chinook, et cetera, et cetera. We wanted that scheduled out so we can see where that is. This year will be a little bit lighter, if that's possible, than last year was for comparison's sake, because it's the second year of the biennium, and the big capital project requests that you had last year aren't in this year. They were last year. And so they'll come forward again next year as the state approves additional dollars for capital projects. So we'll see Olivia a little bit less this year. But I wanted you to see this graphically so you can see how we're planning those meetings. It's obviously going to be dynamic and it'll change from meeting to meeting, but we will include this moving forward as one of the written items so you can anticipate what's on the next committee meeting moving forward. I will also point out, and I've talked with Regent Ramos about this, the intent to approve the budget, the timing of the meetings right now does not work well for the budget cadence. We will do our budget hearings as we did last year following spring break. So at the end of March, it'll take us the month of April to really put the budget together. We can't do it by your April meeting. We don't want to wait all the way till June when we typically have that additional called meeting for things like the athletics transfers, because then it doesn't give our units enough time to actually put their budgets into the system. So May is really the sweet spot for that. So we do need to think about how we can put that additional meeting in there just to address the university's budget.
Did you combine item 7 in that discussion there?
No, but I can go over 7 very quickly. Item 7 is also in the budget document. This is work that we're trying to do. Chris Jones has taken the lead on this to put together the budget development calendar for next year. If you look at it right now, it's kind of ugly. It will not be ugly when you see it, because what we're going to do is put it on the web, much like if you've ever looked at our academic calendar, it's searchable. You can put in the dates that you want to see and it'll pull that. This will be searchable by type of activity. So if you wanted to look at everything related to tuition and fees, that would come up. If you wanted to look at everything in the month of October, that would come up. So it'll be a dynamic thing. So in an Excel file, it's pretty dry to look at, but it'll be accessible to our campus community to see when activities related to the budget are. I want to specifically point out that with the budget development calendar, we just mentioned the meetings in March that will plan fiscal 26. We have put a second set of meetings in the calendar this year in the month of December, and that'll be an opportunity for us to sit down with the units again, talk about their carry forward and talk about where they are in real time, budget to actual, and what they're looking like moving forward.
Anybody have a question on the FY26 budget development calendar? It's a really detailed schedule in your board packages, so please do take a look at it. And our last information item then, thanks Chris, is topic of Cougar athletics and the budget performance. So Leslie's going to be joined along with our athletics director, Ann McCoy, and John Harlow.
I'm happy to sit next to you.
All right. Well, we had our athletic budget oversight committee meeting on Tuesday of this week, if I remember correctly. And John and Ann are here to talk about briefly about how we're going to end fiscal 24, because that's still, of course, being audited, and then where we are year to date for fiscal 25.
Thanks, Leslie. I'll just make a couple introductory comments if that'd be okay. And then John Harlow, the fearless spreadsheet guy, has a lot of the details to share. But I just wanted to spend a couple minutes of introductory comments, really of thanks. Thank you to the board as I've transitioned into the role of director of athletics and really being there as, support and guidance to get me up to speed on a lot of issues, maybe although I've been at Washington State for a long time, maybe had not been directly involved with. So thank you for that. And really to President Schultz and the entire Washington State University community community. I mean, the faculty, staff, students, alums, I mean, the Pullman community, really everybody who's really been, I think, patient and supportive over kind of a rough year, to be honest, of all of the uncertainty. And this board meeting could not be at better timing from the Cougar athletic perspective relative to the last 7 days. I feel like we've had a lot of really positive momentum this fall in really all of our sports. You know, in the last 7 days, volleyball's won, soccer's won, cross country's had national runners of the week. We Coach Dickert was one of the national coaches of the week, and we won the Apple Cup and have a Pac-12 to rebuild going forward. So it's been kind of a great week and a lot of exciting things looking forward to, you know, to really work on and build upon. So just a special thanks to the board, the president, and the entire Washington State University community as we kind of forge this path together moving forward. So without further ado.
Thank you, Ann. Ann and Leslie are always very difficult to follow. First, I need to give validity to Matt's comment on anthracite. That is the official Nike color. That'll be the color of pants the Cougs will be wearing tomorrow night. So very well played, Matt. Now that the important stuff is out of the way, we'll touch quickly on 24. We'll go to 25 and then a few bulleted items to wrap us up here. We'll touch very briefly on 24. That fiscal year is closed. We told the board at the last update that we anticipated to land flat at our just north of $85 million budget. That still holds true. However, we're waiting on some final true-up information from the Pac-12 to solidify that. We're in the middle of our third-party audit right now with Eide Bailey. We anticipate closing that here later in the fall, and they'll be able to provide a formal update and a final update to the board in January when we submit that to the NCAA. But again, all indicators are pointing toward landing flat towards FY24 or for FY24, which is a tremendous step for this department. Switching then to 25, this is always the shortest update that I give you all, and probably the one that I have the most anxiety about because it is so early in the reporting period. There's still so much left to happen. It's early, but nonetheless, revenues thus far are tracking well. We're working really closely with the Pac-12 conference to maximize our year-end distribution. Our game-related revenue is off to a great start. Ticket sales are hovering around our budget. We can always use more, certainly. And our annual fund for donations continues to be our top priority, which, as a reminder, supports our scholarship for our student athletes. Our football team is undefeated. I'll pause there for dramatic effect. They're undefeated and a heck of a team to watch. And we're hopeful that that success, we can build on that and continue to drive our not only ticket sales, but other game-related revenue toward the remainder of the fall. Flipping then to the expenses, similar there on that side, it's early, but we're on pace. We're on pace and budget with compensation, scholarships, operating expenses. But again, I'll reiterate, and I hate to continue to be repetitive, but it is early and we don't know what we don't know lingering out there for the remainder of the year. We continue to be on high alert for travel, recruiting, and other operating related costs. As you all know, as much as we love Pullman and all the incredible benefits that it has, Pullman creates challenges related to travel. And we're paying a premium every time we're traveling in and traveling out. We've certainly put in processes on our internal controls, but it is a difficult budget target to hit. We still need a number of things to stay on pace in order for us to land there at the end of the fiscal year. But the coaches and units are doing everything they can to work within that framework, but it's not without its challenges. We'll continue to report back at future Regents meeting, as well as our budget oversight committee, which Regent Ramos sits on as well. We'll continue to report through that and share another update in November. That's it for 25, but I do want to touch on a couple other things quickly. TV views in particular. For those of you that were here a few Saturday nights ago against Texas Tech, what an incredible night on the Palouse. I think Fox did a great job giving us a platform to showcase Pullman campus, the community. We had 1.2 million views for that game. That put us 11th in views as far as games in that weekend. That was more than Cal versus Auburn, more than Mississippi State versus Arizona State, Kansas, Illinois, Virginia, Wake Forest, and Pitt versus Cincinnati, just to name a few. Fast forward a week, the Apple Cup. The game was on Peacock, so it's not available on the Nielsen ratings. But if you were there, incredible atmosphere in Seattle. Some would say chaotic in a good way. But if you were there or you were watching, or if you have any sort of device that has social media, it's safe to say the millions of eyes have been on the Cougs since Saturday. One final closing thought here, as everyone knows, the excitement around the Pac-12 expansion. We cannot overstate what a wonderful step this is for the future of our university. We're still working through some of the potential impacts for 25, 26, and certainly in 27 and beyond. But once we have some finality there, we will bring it back to the Regents in future discussions throughout the semester.
Well, I think we should take a quick pause. If you look, for the first time since 2019, for a number to be flat is a huge, huge success. So just on behalf of the entire institution, thank you, during a really, really difficult year. So that is outstanding. I have a question in regards to if you could describe or educate us on this scholarship piece and the financial piece of that increasing and impacting our coaches and our athletic department. Like, I don't know if we all fully understand what that looks like for next year.
Sure. I think you're probably referring to pieces of the House settlement, which is still not finalized. Something, just a caveat there, but all indications will be what will probably be in place starting next year. A couple different prongs with that. One, there is going to be a roster cap that'll be implemented. However, it'll raise the scholarship limit. So for football, for example, historically cap there's been 85, that'll be raised up to 105. Baseball has had 11.7 available historically. They'll be able to scholarship up to 35 student athletes. So a significant opportunity to continue to scholarship students, put more students on aid. And if we're not able to increase some of those limits, it obviously does prohibit us from expanding our recruiting compared to some of our competitors.
And just for perspective, John, we spend about $12 million right now on scholarships for the student athletes. And so, it's the opportunity, to provide a lot more opportunities, for Washington State University education, for sure.
Where can you also describe to me just where, taking your budget down to 74 million, where did you carve out the most in that space?
Well, we took pretty significant cuts in a lot of different spaces. One, for salaries, unfortunately, we had to do some layoffs that affected a number of different individuals. We had others that took salary reductions in their contracts. We had others, as we had turnover, that we replaced at a portion of what the previous were. We've also asked each sport and each unit to take up to 12% reductions in those areas, and then just cut back in some of the normal operations, whether it was food, travel restrictions, or what have you. We tried to spread it as best we could, but a number of areas impacted.
John, do we know where that compares to some of our peers, that budget?
As far as the Power 5 related peers, in FY23, the average Power 5 budget was north of 150 million. So, in the previous 5 years, we either ranked last or second to last in our spend compared to the other 64, 65 Power 5 institutions. And now it's at 74 million. Obviously, the next lowest at that level is Oregon State at 91, give or take. So we're well below the lowest there.
I just want to point out Ann is 1-0 and Apple Cups is our permanent AD. So yeah,
Not knocking on lots of wood over here.
Yeah.
I was thinking, what does next week look like for you, Anne, given this week? I just wanted to share my appreciation to this team. And I think that it is really, truly a team that's been working on multiple different alternatives here. And it feels like we're kind of get hit here and there. And you're continuing to move forward with diligence and commitment to our student athletes and our mission and our vision and our values. And so what I want to just also add is not only do you all have work that you need to be doing every day, you're also trying to be actively involved in what this vision of rebuilding Pac-12 is. So not only are you doing all the things, you're adding that in addition. And beyond the three that are here, I know Nathan's been involved. Phil, your team taking what is happening in athletics and amplifying those stories. I mean, this is like a perfect moment for us, but moments like this don't happen without thoughtful intention and strategy. And I look to the right here, and President Schultz has had all of these regents just very open to share with you what we think. And over the last year, this is a bit of a dream to think that we could rebuild Pac-12, and you have led this. And so I just want to demonstrate my appreciation. I think having gotten to stand on the field for just a few minutes on Saturday, the excitement is contagious. And I just think that the more positive and optimistic we can be, the more good things that come to us. So I just want to just share my appreciation for all of the work that you're doing. It does not go unnoticed. And the vision and ability for you to bring this home, President Schultz, is remarkable. So thank you all.
Regent Chair, I would just say, I think for the record, it's incredibly exciting. And I think the reality is that the Board of Regents will need to be thoughtful and probably bold in how we are going to reinvest in our athletics, because you don't get to rebuild a Pac-12 and not have institutional costs to do that. And we've asked our athletic department to cut and cut and cut, just as we have our other departments. But the legacy and the future of Washington State University being a legitimate key player in this next conference that we are rebuilding is going to require some hard decisions and some difficulty around how do we reinvest in our athletics. It's going to be a necessary thing to be at the table.
I just want to add that, Anne, you forgot the most important thing of all the things you experienced lately, and that you became an adopted Coug.
I did. Oh my gosh, that was one of the best honors, to be honest, that I've ever received. And yeah, I became an adopted Coug and a Platinum Alumni Life member through some great support of some great colleagues and alums. So that was tremendously special. So thank you.
I'm probably overstepping here slightly, but just to acknowledge the humility of Anne during that process. If anyone was in the room, it was about halfway through the spiel before she realized that it was for her. She was looking around like, wow, and then all of a sudden it hit her. That speaks to her humility as a leader.
All right, well, we can't leave this conversation without giving you a round of applause. Thank you. Thanks very much for everything. With that,
I just wanted to point out one more thing. Since the last time that we met in June, you are familiar with John being here in this role, but John's role did change a little bit over the summer. He previously reported to Matt as part of Treasury and then was also doing the athletics. It was a side gig. We have moved him back to athletics full time now, so he has a different role, no longer in Matt's sphere, but he still retains a dotted line to me under him.
And he's one of the best dressed numbers guy I've ever seen. So, yeah.
All right, that concludes our 8 information items. We're going to move to our future action items.
Thank you. And I'm going to be joined by Chris Jones and Saichi Oba one more time. And some of the information we'll see here is repetitive from the information that Saichi provided a little bit earlier. I have the driver. So we are here asking for review of a tuition proposal, and where we are is a little bit unusual. You remember last year with the change in the state law that moved the cap up from the spring to October 1, that we were able to do this earlier. But this is even earlier than that because we don't have the state cap number yet. What we are asking you to consider is let us go to the cap. The cap last year was 3%. It's based on a 14 years in the denominator, so it can't frankly move that much. It's either going to be 3.1 or 2.9. It can't actually move that much in the space of a year. So we don't have the actual numbers in here, but we want you to consider taking us up to the cap, whatever that number might be. And then we would bring this forward for you in November for an action item. You understand that you have this tuition setting authority. It is subject to the cap. All other rates, you have the ability to set those as needed. Today, what we're asking for is you to consider the rates for the undergraduates, resident, non-resident, the graduates, resident, non-resident, but there will be other rates that we bring forward to you later on this fall. One of those is the College of Medicine. We will have to look at that a little bit more closely given the resources that are available for the College of Medicine. I don't need to look at that. I don't need to tell you the budget. We just did that. Here we go. This chart is really interesting. The arrows are important because those are years where Washington State University intentionally brought in a tuition increase below the cap. We are very thoughtful about affordability here, and that, which is critically important because our students definitely need that. What I will say, Saichi's going to give us a little bit more information, more context than he did this morning about affordability as a whole. We know that Washington is a generous state as far as our students are concerned. We don't take this lightly, bringing up students' tuition, but we did want to highlight that we have been below the cap for several years. I'm going to steal this slide from Chris because I wanted to say something. I did assign it to him, and I went, oh no, I want to say something. The higher education price index is really important here. This is a measure, just like the CPI, of inflation in the system. And if you go back to where the state implemented the cap, which was the 17-18 year, and if we took our tuition at that time up by HEPI, up to today, students' tuition would be $975 more than it is now. That's really meaningful. That's just to be ahead of inflation or to be at inflation. So that's nothing strategic. That's nothing different. That's nothing else. So when you hear from our community that it has been hard to do what we are tasked with doing, meeting the students where they need to be in the classroom, meeting them where they need to be as far as student affairs are, doing the back office operations, this is one of the reasons why we haven't kept up with inflation for sure. And we can certainly get more efficient in how we do our business, but this is real to us. And now I'm going to turn it over to these folks.
Sure. Thanks, Leslie. So this is just to illustrate if the cap is 3%, and again, we expect it to be around 3%, with a rate increase of 3%, that we project it would generate another $3 million in net tuition revenue. We didn't want to publish precise rates yet without knowing the exact percentage increase, but did want to show where we are currently. This is after the 3% tuition increase the board approved last year for this current academic year. These are the annual tuition rates for undergraduate and graduate students, resident and non-resident. And I'll pass it over to Saichi.
Thanks, Chris. So we did talk about this about 2 hours ago. Washington provides the Washington College Grant. It is very generous for students with financial need. It offers full and part-time awards up to almost $12,000 a year. Part-time awards would be considerably less. College-bound students, and you've heard a little about them as well, are a specific population in the state. If they also attend a university or college, they are eligible for an additional $500. And then finally, there are students who do not go through college bound, but meet other family income minimums, and they would also receive a $500 award through the Bridge Grant. Outcome of affordability efforts have been outstanding here in Washington. Going back to what Leslie said, 10 years ago, if you go back 10 years, our tuition has only increased about 4%. So that's remarkable. I mean, a gallon of milk probably is, double, triple in that time. Resident undergraduates who pay no tuition has improved from 31% in 14 to 34% in 23. Undergraduates who pay full tuition has fallen from 42% in 14 to 35 in 23. And then resident undergraduates graduating with no loan debt, that has jumped up to 51% in 2023. That is a really good marker for us. What do we mean by the full impact of the Washington College Grant hasn't been experienced? We touched on this a little earlier. There are more students that are eligible in the state of Washington that are not going to college. We need to get more of them to utilize the grant. It's expendable throughout post-secondary ed. We just have to figure this out as a state. The ability to earn or to gain some type of help to go to school is throughout the spectrum of incomes. Students from the lowest echelon, lowest ladder rung would have essentially enough money to cover their tuition at WSU. FAFSA outreach or financial aid outreach, this is probably the only area in enrollment management where we have to talk simultaneously to current students and prospective students. We learned a lot during the pandemic about what works talking with students about financial aid. We still employ many of those methods. We utilize video, text. We know there are some students that need to meet in person. We try to keep some line of communication open that a student would like to use. We have sections of how we speak to students in Spanish. We have staff that are fluent in Spanish. We think this is, and I've said this before to you all, the number one way to increase enrollment is how you help a student afford their education. That almost supersedes all other things you can do in enrollment management. I shared this as well. The FAFSA delay was detrimental to our overall effort. It delayed our ability to send out awards. 6% fewer students filed a FAFSA for WSU. The uncertainty, that is just not good in the mind of a student or family. And then Regent Cerna asked me the question on the last bullet, are we over this? No, my sense is until December 1 comes and go and FAFSA is rolling out, we probably are not completely over this. You've seen this as well. Finally, the line is moving up. So this is first year enrollment, 2 years in a row. And you've seen this one as well. This is our overall undergraduate head count, and it has fallen dramatically since the fall of 19. This is the focus of enrollment management currently. Retention will also become a focus of enrollment management, but it is what it is right now. We need to stem this, and you do so by building back your first year class and start regaining your retention.
I have a question. Can you go back to that? Leslie,
Yep.
If you were to put your budget slide, would your spend look the same on the trajectory there? Because that would be interesting, right? Because they kind of correlate. Okay.
I'm on the thing. It would not, and I can do that for you.
And then finally, overall undergraduate enrollment trends in the state, enrollment has dropped. We have dropped more at WSU. The bright spot has been global. I would say now we saw what Everett was able to do and also the Tri-Cities. Pullman also had an increase, obviously, in first year students, and we had a very small increase in transfer students. But as I mentioned at the very beginning of my talk, we need to turn around transfer. We needed some increase, and we got it this fall. That's all the slides I have on enrollment.
And this is information just for you to take a look at it. It's actually more meaningful to see it on another slide here. But these are the rate increases dating back to 2010, 2011. And the same thing for the dollars, just so you have it. But here's where it makes more sense, because this is the resident undergrad with that same information. So in the period coming out of the Great Recession, every higher education institution in the country was dealing with tremendous state funding supports. And there's a graph that we can show you where it crosses over, where the state appropriation is actually less than what the student tuition is paying. Every state institution probably had double-digit increases. This institution did it for 3 years. They were above 10%. They were actually 12, 13, and 14. So they were big, big increases. And the state said, stop it. In 2013 and 2014 and 2014, 2015, zero. That was mandated by the state. Then for the 15, 16, and 16, 17 years, the state said, roll it back. So we took ours down 5%, took it down 10%. The good news there is they backfilled that with actual state appropriation. So if you're going to do that, put your money where your mouth is and you fund that for us. So they did, and that's fantastic. Then you can see for 2017, 2018, where the cap came in. And that's why that's that 14 years rolling average of the change in the median wage. So it can't really change that much, friends. The current impact of inflation will not show up for ages from now, so it's not in real time, but that's why it's been that consistent number all along. That number for the current year, the 11,305, that would be, I wrote down, $12,236 if we had adjusted for HEPI along the way. So that's just a lot more graphically a better way to take a look at this. I wanted to show you some brief information about peers. I know we've had a lot of discussion earlier this morning about are the strategic plan peers the right peers? Maybe, maybe not. This is the strategic plan peer set, and this is our tuition rate that the students see relative to that. And we're in the higher quartile here. We're fifth or sixth from the top. What I want to show you though, when we go into the November meeting, is a little bit more information. This is tuition. What we have available as resources per student isn't just tuition, it's tuition plus the state appropriation. And so what we need to do is take these numbers and add the state appropriation per student to show you where we fall in comparison to a peer set with both of those numbers, because that's what you have to spend, is both of those things together. And I think that we will look a lot differently without having done the math yet, but I'm pretty sure we'll. Yeah, please.
One comment as we look at the peers, in a way, you also have to ask yourself, does it really matter what the tuition is in Mississippi or somewhere else? If we're not recruiting students from there, it's an interesting numerical thing, but it really is much more important on what it is in the states where we're getting most of the students. And I just think it's easy to get enamored where we're the top or bottom and middle here. We don't recruit students from any of these states. It really doesn't matter.
Absolutely.
I think the other piece that's incredibly important here is what is the available state support, particularly to individuals with less means. In Missouri, the state support is zero, right? So that the grants that we're talking about here being available are simply not available. If you go into Georgia, you get some examples of where that exists, but it's all for higher in GPA students, which tends to align with SES. And so you've got the inverse deal. So I mean, if you look at it, it's like, oh, well, we're similar to Mizzou, but the actual impact on our students is dramatically different here than in Missouri.
Great, thank you for that context. This is important though, because this is what we feel in the state of Washington. We are the highest. And that has been that case for some time now. And what's fascinating when you see that we are higher than UW, it's because of the fees. So our tuition is actually lower than UW's, but when you add in the fees, which our students have approved, that's how we get above that. And remember that our students have the SNA fee, the fee for UREC, the fee for health, the fee for transit, the tech fee, the Chinook fee, and the food pantry fee.
So Leslie, when the students go forward and contemplate fees, do they look at it in aggregate or separately?
I'm going to defer to my friend Chris here to answer that because he spent more time working with the students on this process.
I think in general, they're separate. So they're focused on that specific student fee and what programs it's funding. We do try to present the full picture to students, but they're most invested in what that fee is and what the needs are tied to that fee.
With the University of Washington tuition, that's in-state, correct?
Yes, these are all resident undergrads, yeah.
And then, so it begs the question of what the actual percentage of in-state students the University of Washington actually educates.
What a really good point.
So I do think, those are message, I'd be interested to understand that of what their percentage is in comparison to 85% for Washington State University this first year. And then what are the out-of-state component? I just think it'd be helpful as they are legislative statistics and stats we need to start carrying to the state of Washington.
Yep. We will have that for you for the November meeting because that's available via iPads.
Regent McDonald has a question.
Is it helpful to us to also throw in a column on living expenses and dorm fees when we compared to UW?
I'm gonna ask Saichi if you have that info from Joy. Is the cost of attendance, the differential, different for Pullman versus Seattle? I mean.
Yeah, I don't have that. I mean, it's available, but I couldn't tell you that right now. But we do have housing, living expenses as well that we could compare both institutions with.
If it's helpful for us, it would be good to throw that column in whenever we can.
Well, I mean, we can pull cost of attendance. I mean, that is the financial aid metric. So we can do that for November.
If it's in our favor.
I would
it's important no matter what.
I guarantee you the cost of gas on the other side of the mountains is a lot higher. So
I would just add though, that the quality of facilities might be different between University of Washington and WSU as it relates to resident halls. So, I mean, I think there's an aspect as I'm deep in, decision making, and napping pods and dorm rooms are a lot more important than I think that they should be. But when we have, that being part of the choices, it's just something else to consider. And we know that we have maybe deferred some of our investments in our residence housing. And I think that from an enrollment perspective, that's a part of that whole puzzle piece that we need to be thinking about. So,
Sachi, our overall enrollment, how do we compare this year to like UW, Central, Eastern, all that?
One of the benefits or not, we always start sooner. So our census date comes and goes. They have not been in school, I believe, 10 days. They might be coming up on it in a week or something. So we don't know. We don't know yet.
What you told me yesterday was really helpful, because we've heard this about Idaho, the state of Idaho, and how that might be different.
Sure. And my comment was because people often will compare WSU to U of I because of the proximity, and there are some real differences. One, the minimum standard to be admitted to the baccalaureate programs at both institutions is different. It is tougher to be admitted to WSU. Idaho does provide some generous financial aid that is not need-based, and that's also a very different approach to helping students go to school in Idaho. So, I mean, those two things add up to making it attractive to students from Idaho.
Sachi, was that slide 2 or 3 back? Since COVID, 2020, 13.9% fewer. Did I read that right?
Yes. Yeah. That's the time frame. Yes.
Regent Blankenship, did you have a question?
It was more of a cumulative summary comment, similar to what Provost Riley Tillman shared. Several years ago, we had a young student present to us in Vancouver, and it was someone never dreamed of going to college. And this grant we keep talking about was presented to him, and a creative high school teacher made the whole class he sat in one day fill out this card for that grant. And it was so early in his scholastic career, he'd forgotten he'd done it, and was ready to move on and try to find a job out of high school, and got an acceptance letter from WSU Vancouver that not only was he accepted, it was paid for. And he couldn't believe it. He was a student body president presenting to us. And I was like you several years ago, this is a key component. We got to jump all over that. And it's still one of the best kept secrets in the country. And that's frustrating, but I don't know if that fixes our enrollment picture per se, but it's certainly an important piece if it's the cost that's keeping some people away. But for someone like that, what a home run. Could live at home, got a four-year degree. It was affordable and very successful student and on their way. And somehow I'd like to crack that egg, and that would be your podcast. I think if we can find that person again, because them telling the story was unbelievable. And I couldn't let the conversation end without reminding that story. That it was phenomenal.
Thank you. I think we're getting to the closing
Yes,
here.
Last couple of slides talking about next steps. So as we mentioned earlier, we'll get the notice from the Office of Financial Management by October 1st, what that rate cap can be for resident and non-resident undergraduate and graduate students. So we'll bring that back for action in November. Also in November, future action items. the LCNS Floyd College of Medicine tuition rate, other self-sustaining and professional program rates may change as well. If any of those are proposed to change, we'll bring those in November. January action item on tuition rates for medicine and potentially others. Our tuition and fee journey takes us all the way out to April. You'll also remember you'll be looking at potential changes to housing and dining rates, the student tech fee, student services and activities fees, and potential other changes to other mandatory fees.
Okay. Any other questions? This is one of the most significant decisions we make throughout the year. So I really appreciate the teamwork to bring us all the data to contemplate ahead of time. We'll come back to this subject in November. This is about accessibility for our students. And so really appreciate the accessibility and affordability story coming together. Thank you.
Oh, go ahead. Can I just add that changing the schedule, I know last year prompted students to reach out because they were unaware of how quickly we were going to be making some of these decisions. So I just want to continue to emphasize the need for that outreach, which I know already occurs, and maybe just a point to Regent Vogel that if there's additional outreach that we need to do to make sure students are providing their input. I think that the slide that Regent Dickinson is looking for, when I think of raising revenue, which we do every year for students, and affordability is something I think is all part of our value set. And we want to find ways to either create more opportunities for grants and for scholarships, but also to find a way to reduce what our expenses are. And so this comes with, in my mind, even more of a need for us to be clear about what we say no to. And so I don't say that to be kind of a downer, but to say that if we're going to continue to every year raise our tuition, which is what we have done and what I think we need to do, I'm not saying that we don't, we also need to be looking at where we're going to say no. And that is hard to do here and becomes even more critical in this next couple of years. So first, just making sure students understand the timeline. We're going to continue to move quickly. And secondly, how are we finding ways to reduce our expenses?
Well, and Saichi, I would just say, I would love to see if we move forward with the 3% increase, how do we wrap around FAFSA completion and become the university that provides access to that college fund grant and everything that's available. I think we could do something unique and different perhaps, and leverage what you're already doing, but double down in that space.
Noted. Will do.
Okay. Anything else, Leslie?
No, ma'am.
All right, so we're going to pivot subjects here. We're going to talk about amendments to the WSU Voluntary Investment Program. And Leslie will be joined by Interim Vice President and Chief Human Resource Officer Jennifer Klein and the Director of Benefit Services, Ann Monroe.
Thank you, Regent Ramos. I believe that you all had the opportunity to meet Jennifer Klein back when we were at the Spokane campus in the spring, as she presented there along with Teresa Elliott Cheslick. And you also, of course, know Ann Monroe because we recently brought forward an amendment to the same plan under the Secure 2.0 Act. And as that is the gift that keeps on giving, we have more things to change in our plan, and I will turn it over to these ladies.
Good afternoon. Thank you. Good afternoon. So the next rollout or peeling off of the onion skin for Secure 2.0 is as of January 1, 2025. They have carved out an additional contribution level for individuals who turn 60 to 63 in a year as a catch-up contribution. Currently, that's a $7,500 catch-up contribution as a voluntary under the voluntary plan. The Secure Act will allow people to do up to $11,250 or possibly $12,000 if the IRS raises the contribution level. Little background, our voluntary plan is that voluntary. It is not a required contribution plan that anybody participates in. They voluntarily do that. There is no matching contributions from the employer, so there's no cost to the employer on these plans. And really, this is almost a housekeeping request because it is an IRS change that's going into effect January 1. So we just need to update our plan document to reflect the change. And then, of course, through our internal systems, we'll get them updated. So if anybody wants to do that, they will have the ability to make that extra contribution. So I do have some very minor changes. It's primarily in section 4 of the document, if you were to look at it. So you have a 20+ page document with really a 1 page of adjustments on there. I'm not going to specifically do the reading of the wording. It's just acknowledging that from here forward, individuals that turn those ages, and it will be forthgoing. So it's kind of interesting. One of the things that we investigated is, okay, so I'm 63 as of January 1, but I turned 64 on November 3rd. Am I going to be able to do it this year? No, it's the years you turn 60, 61, 62, or 63. So the year somebody turned 64, it would stop and they go back to the regular catch-up level contribution. So that's our request to update the document that we're bringing forward to you as a request. As you're aware, our 403B plans is designated by the state RCW, are administered by the institutions. It does require our Board of Regents change to make these sort of adjustments to our plan documents.
Are there any other comments on the revisions? Go ahead.
When is this supposed to be effective? This will go into effect January 1, 2025.
Okay.
Yeah, and we are asking that you allow us to take this forward for action because of that timeline.
Yeah, so just to clarify, so tomorrow, what we'd like to do is move this to an action item in the spirit of our streamlined future action item process.
Yeah. And one of the things, the other nice part is to get this taken care of, and then that will also allow us to move forward with our communication efforts out to the university since it's part of it's been officially approved. If anybody is interested, we have currently of our participants that are contributing to a 403B plan, the voluntary 403B plan, we have about 145 people that this would impact. Of those 145 people, I would say about 80 of them are already contributing at the maximum level. And I would anticipate those individuals would increase their contribution to this higher level as well. And then as a reminder, I guess I'm just sharing this, January of 2026, we already addressed this last time, but that's when the Roth 403B option goes into effect, where anybody that earns more than 145K, but you guys already approved that last year. So it's just the IRS did delay the implementation of that.
Okay, are there any objections to moving this future action item to an action item at tomorrow's Board of Regent meeting? Okay, great. Thank you, Anne.
Thank you.
So we're on to our next item, which is federal surplus property program participation. And Leslie, let's see, who do you have?
I have
Vicky
Vicki Murray here with me, but also Don Daniels. Yeah, Chief Jenkins is not able to be with us today.
Welcome.
So this item is interesting. This is a requirement. We would like to be eligible to ask the federal government for surplus property, which sounds like what a great idea. If they have surplus property, wouldn't we love to have that for the benefit of law enforcement and safety? But the regulation requires that our governing board actually give us permission to do so. And I will turn it over to the two of you to speak that through.
Okay, so the U.S. Department of Defense offers a program that specifically allows for the transfer of excess equipment for use by state and local law enforcement agencies. Many of our local agencies do participate in this program. The city of Pullman does so. And it's allowed them to obtain equipment that they need at very low to no cost. Our WSU Police Department would like to take advantage of this opportunity as well. And in order to do so, as Leslie said, we must have your approval, and we must also certify that we have certain policies and training in place before we make application to receive that equipment. And we do have those policies and procedures in place. So I believe your packet had like a 40-page document that described the whole program, but are there any questions?
40-page document for surplus property. And will the request for the F-16 surplus F-16 for the aerospace program be first in line? Okay, well, come on.
You just want a SWAT vehicle.
There's two in the county. I'm not sure we need a third. Yeah.
So we're asking that we allow the participation in the surplus program. We'd also like to accelerate this item to an action item tomorrow, as opposed to a future action item. Are there any objections? None? Okay, thank you for your help on this. We have one last future action item, and it's to discuss the WSU Pullman undergraduate technology fee allocation amendment.
Thank you, Regent Ramos. And then our last item, Dave Soleil is here also to. Oh, look, he came over. Look at that. I speak and he is there. As you know, you approved the allocations of the student technology fee. The Pullman group has a fee request that was not able to get in when we did the other ones earlier this spring. So we're bringing that forward now. This requires your approval. You want to, either of you? You know more about it than I do.
Sure, I can speak to it a little bit. So there was an opportunity that arose in April of this year as the enterprise license agreement with Adobe was being discussed, where we could get discounted licenses for Adobe Express, which is a content creation tool or a suite of tools for our students. So the Pullman the Pullman Technology Fee Committee met again and did vote in favor of this roughly $99,000 allocation, which was in budget. And the Pullman ASWSU Senate approved it as well. So we're coming back since this is an adjustment to the allocation schedule you already approved.
Just for clarification, to make sure I understand, this is in addition to the technology fee that was approved prior, correct?
This is the distribution of the fees collected from the technology fee. The fee is the same. This is but you have to approve both the fee and how they spend the dollars.
Are there any other questions? So we're also asking that we accelerate this topic to an action item tomorrow. Any objections? Okay, thank you. Now we're moving on to our one action item.
Our one action item that we didn't ask to be moved up, but you are joined by Olivia this time, the first time we've seen her all day. It's so unusual for us. I'm going to have Olivia speak to the need for this, but you are aware that we had a $10 million allocation from the state to do some work at the dairy, and that work is well underway and actually it's coming to conclusion. However, we have had some challenges with the road inside the dairy over this last year, and we have made a decision to allocate an additional $150,000 to that project to get the road in before it starts raining imminently. This one, I have to apologize. I've spoken with Regent Ramos about this before. We've already done this. We've already made the decision to go ahead and do the road work because the time is so short, but now we need you to ratify the decision that we made to do that. you can talk about the thing.
Yes, so I'll just give you a brief update on the project. The reason we asked for 10 million in the current biennium was because the Not Dairy Center, KDC, has suffered from lack of capital investment for many years. And so the different barns are in disrepair. As Leslie said, the road is in disrepair. It's got potholes. In the winter, it's very difficult to navigate. It's actually a safety hazard for the staff and the animals. The manure management system is plugged up. And so because of that, there's a risk to discharge into the creek. And so we sat down and listed out the things that needed to be done and prioritized what needed to be done, what could be done for $10 million. And so the biggest thing we did was a new barn for heifers and the non-lactating cows, and also a bigger, better manure management system. Once we got that done, there was still money left over and obviously a fairly long list of things that needed to be done. And so we met and prioritized those again. One of the things that we, as I pointed out, needed to be done was the road. So we had enough money to do asphalt, and obviously asphalt doesn't have as long a life as concrete. And so the animal science department actually had funds, it's a gift fund for animal welfare, and they kicked in the $150,000 that was needed to go from asphalt to concrete. And so that's what we've done. That also allowed us to put a new storms drain system at the road so that when it rains, you know, the water actually goes somewhere instead of staying in the roads. And so that's kind of what we've done. We went ahead and gave the go-ahead to the contractor so that we could get the work done by the end of October, so that the road could actually be used and in place.
So this is $150,000 item, just to clarify, for animal and people safety. That's been covered, but we're going to be asking the regents to approve this action item tomorrow.
Yeah, it's actually technically it's approval to increase the project budget from 10 million to 10,150.
Okay, thank you for clarifying that.
Sorry.
So that's tomorrow. Are there any questions though on this item?
I will say, and Olivia can speak more to this, this might expose the need to have a little bit greater delegated authority so that when urgent things like this come up, that we have the ability to act and not have to come back and ask for forgiveness for doing so. I mean, this was a safety issue. It was an issue with the dairy cow's health as well. So we needed to get this done as quickly as possible. We've been working with the Office of Research, of course, with Connors and with the university's vet to figure out what is the best, most viable solution. And it is to get that road in immediately.
There's lots more detail about road grade and infections, but we can talk about that offline.
Yes, we don't have to do it today.
Okay. Great. If there's nothing further, we will move on to that tomorrow. All right, great. Well, that concludes our one action item. There will be 4 in total tomorrow that will come before the board for consideration. Lastly, I will note that today's meeting packet includes several written reports. We have the final submission of state operating budget request, the final submission of capital budget request, contracts signed under delegated authority that include Cougar Athletics Aeromark contract update, the proprietary variety management and international new varieties network, and the major capital projects list.
Those two, proprietary variety management and international, those are the apples. Remember, we had a conversation about those back in June and you gave us permission to move forward with those contracts. They're completed.
Great, thank you. This concludes the Finance and Administration Committee meeting. I'll turn it back over to Chair Schauer.
Well, Regent Ramos, it's an hour ahead of time, completing a really important review of a lot of heavy financial information. So just want to thank Leslie Brunelli as well for all of the teamwork to make this happen. So thank you. this now concludes our day. So there's plenty of work and preparation for tomorrow. Tomorrow too will be a full day. And so I would just nudge the Board of Regents just to pay attention to materials that are being pushed out in your email in preparation for tomorrow and for our board meeting. So at this time, I will close the Board of Regents meeting. Tomorrow, the board will reconvene for the Executive and Governance Committee meeting and the regular Board of Regents meeting Friday, September 20th at 8:30 a.m. in this room. So thank you all. Appreciate the hard work and the presence today. I know there's been a lot happening and a lot moving forward. So we'll see you tomorrow morning. Thank you all.